When did you verbally destroy someone you didn't know for their horrible behavior? So I went to Subway yesterday to get one of those delicious $5 footlongs. Upon arrival, I saw 3 girls, probably all about 17 or 18. The first 2 order, and the server asks the last girl what toppings she wants. She's on her phone, so she doesn't answer. The server asks her again, not being impatient or rude, just asks. And the girl snapped. "Can't you see I'm on the phone here? God, you're so rude. Just wait till I'm done." I was so offended and embarrassed for her server, so I couldn't help but say something to her. That was extremely rude. You came here to get a sub, don't yell at her for providing the service you asked for. Just get off your phone, order your toppings, and stop acting like a child. She looked at me with contempt and anger, but I think I intimidated her, so she didn't say anything back to me. The server looked at me, smiled, and mouthed the words, "Thank you." One of my customers where I used to work, this guy was being absurdly rude to me and my coworker. I'd already told him quite clearly that there was a line, and he'd be waiting in it in the order he came in. This was a high-end store at Christmas time, so the sense of entitlement is a little bit too common. He called my manager an idiot after having to re-ring something. Another customer behind him, and half his size, taps him on the shoulder and says loudly, "Would you mind shutting the frick up and letting these people do their jobs? You're seriously teeing us all off." The bigger guy threatens him, and the smaller guy goes, "If you were as tough as you like to think you are, you wouldn't have to be such a prick. Just shut the frick up." I magically found a 50% off coupon for my new favorite person. My buddy and I were at a movie, and these guys who were just talking about how they'd got out of basic training were bashing the movie and laughing, making rude comments, stuff like that. Well, my buddy tells them to pipe the frick down, and they flip him off, but they do quiet down. After the movie, we're at the front of the pack, right behind the 6 or 7 guys who were being rude, and my buddy says, "That was really rude to everyone, how are you behaving?" And one of them, the loudest, whips out his military ID and says, "Yeah, well, I'm a fricking Marine and I fight for your freedoms, idiot." My buddy, who just happens to be an officer, whips out his ID and says, "And I'm a Marine officer, and just because you have the honor of wearing a uniform, it doesn't give you the right to be a crap-spewing child." Then he made them stand at attention right at the door of the movie theater and apologized to every patron exiting. My money is on those idiots never actually seeing any action and yet busting their entitlement out on everyone they see anyway. Some people really do just sign up for the credit and status rather than out of a drive to do anything good. I used to work in the toy department of a retail store. The Leapfrog laptop had just come out and they were really expensive. So I was straightening shelves and I noticed a kid just wailing away on one of these laptops. Their mum is nowhere to be found. I approached the kid and asked him nicely, "Is that how you play with your toys at home?" The kid gave me a sheepish, "No," and placed it back on the shelf. I was feeling pretty good about myself at that point when the kid's mum came out of nowhere and very rudely told me that I had no right to speak to her child that way. I calmly looked this poor excuse for a mother in the eye and said, "Ma'am, your son was about to break a $150 toy. Our store has a you break it, you buy it policy. If you would like me to give it back to him so he can continue hitting it, I'd be happy to ring you up at my register for the damages." She then proceeded to give me an eat crap and die look, grabbed her son, and stalked off. In college, my friends and I were sitting at a table, and behind us was a kid sitting by himself. I'll admit, he looked a little bit like a cliché D-bag. Popped collar, gelled hair, super tan, all the stuff. A group of kids in the same area had been laughing and talking loudly about his general fashion sense for a while now, though. Eventually, one of the girls got up, walked over, and proclaimed loudly, "I'm sorry, but I have to help you out because you look like a total—" She used a slur for a gay person. Then she pulled his collar down. The kid sat there in disbelief as she walked away and his eyes started welling up. I was infuriated and walked over to her table. In the most conversational tone I could muster, I said, "Oh hey, do you know that guy?" She said she didn't, and then the scolding began. "So you just thought it would be appropriate to demean a complete stranger in public to look like a frickin' cool kid in front of all of your friends. I hope you feel better and that you all got a good laugh at his expense. Maybe next time you can pause to reflect before you're a total butthole." I then walked over to the table and invited the kid to sit with me and my friends. Turns out he was gay, had just transferred to the college, and didn't know anyone. I used to work at McDonald's when I was in high school, so I sympathize with other teenage fast food workers. A while ago, I was in the local McDonald's where I used to work, and it was apparent that it was the cashier's first day working there, but he seemed to be doing okay. He entered something wrong, though, and asked his manager to fix it, and the manager came over and started tearing into him in front of all the customers, calling him a fricking idiot and an inbred monkey, and so on and so forth. After I received my order at the counter, I asked the manager to come over and told him, Please do not talk to that cashier that way ever again. Just because you're a day shift manager at a McDonald's, it doesn't make you a superior human being, and it gives you no right to treat others, especially your employees, like dirt. After I sat down, the other manager came over and brought me some apple pies and thanked me for standing up to that guy. Apparently he acted that way towards everyone. Back in college, there was a mentally challenged guy who worked in the dorm dining hall. He obviously had some problems, but was with it enough to hold down the job, remember certain students, carry on conversations, stuff like that. One day I was behind some girls in line who were standing right in front of him talking about how they didn't like being served by a, quote, retard, and so on and so forth. I said, he has ears and he can hear you. He's a person just like the rest of us and you shouldn't treat people like that. They called me the B word and walked away. I'm a student in a culinary arts program. We rotate through stations and run a full operation-sized cafeteria on the university campus. One of the stations, desserts, requires that you serve and plate in front of the customer. I was helping this one woman, and another guy who comes in every day and is the worst customer I've ever dealt with, budged in front of her and reached for the dessert that I was still plating. The customer says loudly, "Excuse me, that's mine. She's not done and you can wait and not be so rude. You're unbelievable." He walked away with an unhappy, childish look on his face. She looked at me and said, "Sorry, I can't stand rude people." I couldn't have been more grateful. In short, had a customer stand up for me against a really rude regular. I'm a pretty mellow guy who travels for a living. I don't really let the small things get to me. A couple of years ago, I was on a flight that was already running 30 minutes late. I was really thinking to myself that the connection was going to be tight, most likely involving running or a brisk walk for a mile or so through ATL. I was one of the last to board the plane, and I had to check my bag since there was no more room. The 4 or 5 people behind did the same thing. What are you going to do? Well, I worked my way down the aisle and there was a guy there asking people to shift their bags or move stuff that definitely wasn't moving. He was trying to get his oversized bag to fit and there was just no place for it. He called for the flight attendant who walked up and says, "Sir, we're out of room. We'll have to check your bag." Well, that was it for him. He went off on her, started yelling, "This airline sucks. I'm a million-mile member. I want your employee number and name," so on and so forth. At that point, I pretty much mentally snapped. I felt horrible for the flight attendant who was just doing her job, and this guy spent 5 minutes making a butthead out of himself and burning up time that we could have been airborne in. People were gawking, looking away, cringing, and overall just hoping he'd stop so that they could move on. I just yelled, "Shut up! Shut the hell up!" At this point, I was shaking with anger, and then I went off. "Take your bag to the front of the plane, check it, and stop with this insanity. You are what is wrong with air travel. Your sense of entitlement makes me want to puke. If you're a million-mile flyer, you know the rules of flying. You know how this works. Why punish everyone else on this flight? You've insulted this lovely flight attendant, and you've made everyone on this plane uncomfortable with your little show, and I'm now another 5 minutes late for my connection. I want you and your little Napoleon complex issues," he was about 5'5", "to shut up and sit down. Do we have a problem?" He started spluttering and looking all flustered, but didn't say a single word. Somebody at the back of the plane started clapping, and soon the whole cabin was applauding me. I just sat down and waited while everyone clapped, and this guy took a long walk of shame to the front of the plane and back. The flight attendant thanked me, and so did everyone else. I didn't mean to do it, but I just can't stand people like that. The best part was I had free drinks for the flight. The flight attendant gave me a stack of free drink cards for my next couple of flights, and one of the passengers gave me a voucher for free Wi-Fi that he'd won. It was very satisfying. This one is straining the edge of plausibility a little bit for the narrator, but I do hope that it happened. In my experience, entitled people generally feel completely justified and have no problem arguing that they should be given special treatment for some reason or other, if they don't resort to tough guy crap. But it's not impossible, and it's the kind of thing people would clap for, so here's hoping. I have worked at Chili's for about 5 years now. There have been so many experiences with rude people that I've lost count, but this was the worst one by far. I'm waiting tables about this time of year, graduation time, and I've got a party of 25 call ahead at about 7, and they say they'll be arriving in 30 minutes. We set the table up for them and we're anticipating their arrival. They actually ended up showing up about an hour and a half later than they said they would. We'd since broken up the big table and set other smaller parties there. They arrived and were angry that their table wasn't ready for them, and the really soft-spoken, sweet host that was working that night simply explained to them that they thought they'd chosen somewhere else to go since they hadn't come sooner. The lady that was speaking to the host immediately burst out saying that we should have known they were still coming, and that she knew Chili's was a terrible idea and that we are all awful at our jobs. The host, almost in tears, says that she'll set up another table for them in a closed section and that I'll be taking care of them. I should also mention these same people come in all the time, they're rude to everyone and never tip and always complain so that they can get free food. When I wait on large parties by myself, I always start everyone out with a water just because it takes a little bit to get everyone's drink order and get it out to them, and I figure it's better at least to have some water available while you're waiting. As soon as we get them settled in, several of them start complaining that they don't want water, and I was rude to not offer them a different option. I simply explained to them that I'll be bringing them whatever they'd like and that the water was just to hold them for the time being. They proceed to tell me that I'm an idiot and tell me to get this mess out of my face, referring to the water. Most of them start ordering strawberry lemonade. I make all of the drinks and bring them out to them. People then start to complain that this is really nasty. They tell me it doesn't taste anything like it did last time, and I tell them that we make it by measurement every time. But I'd be glad to make a new batch for them. I go and pour out what we had and make another batch of the strawberry lemonade and take it out to them again. And they again complain that it's nasty. I offer to get them something else and they just say, we want a waiter that isn't an idiot and knows how to make strawberry lemonade. I go get the manager to explain that we make it the same way every time, and they roll their eyes and tell the manager that I was being rude to them. Fast forward to when they're eating their meal, they start being really rude to me again. They started pouring their drinks out on the floor on purpose, throwing food, and insulting me right in front of my face. I had a couple of other tables that complained that this huge party is being extremely loud, which they were. I went over and asked if they minded being a little quieter, as it was disturbing the other tables in the restaurant. One kid then yells, "Oh, you think I'm too loud, punk?" And they all start being even louder than before, and some tables got up and left. That was the final straw. I yelled over them and told them they're no longer welcome at our restaurant. That shut them up. One kid told me that I couldn't do that, and I said, when you start causing our other good-paying customers to leave, I can do what I want. Now get out. They had the nerve to ask for boxes for their food, which they hadn't touched because they were too busy being loud. I told them that I could care less if they wanted their food and that they needed to leave. My manager and I stood at the door smiling, watching them all walk out. One girl told me I ruined her graduation party. I informed her that she had no class and got what she deserved. A few of them stayed and talked to my manager, begging him to allow them back because it was their favorite place to eat. He told them that they cost the company money when they came in and that they were never welcome back. I haven't seen them since. 100% improvement. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My dad was driving around with his terminally ill friend. They needed to go to a pharmacy, and seeing as how my dad's friend gets short of breath easily, they were hoping for a handicap spot. Unfortunately, none were vacant, so they had to park farther away. A squat, muscular man comes walking out of the pharmacy and starts to open the door of his Ford F-150 parked in a handicap spot that he clearly didn't need to be in, nor did he have a sticker. My friend's dad called out to him as he was getting in, "Excuse me? Yeah? Is your handicap physical or mental?" The guy's face went white as a ghost and he quickly got into his truck and pulled away. I was at the grocery store on my lunch break. This older woman, who had some obvious mental and emotional problems, was walking up to a checkout. She went to take her salad out and it opened up and just went everywhere. So she starts crying and saying how she can't afford to buy another salad and apologizing for the mess. A clerk and I went over and started helping her. The clerk tells her it happens all the time and that they won't charge her, but the woman was still visibly upset and continued apologizing and crying. Then I hear two 40 to 45-year-old women, with their hair all done up, expensive clothes, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, giggling and having little laughing outbursts every time the old lady says something. I was appalled, but whatever. To my amazement, they start openly mocking her loud enough that we could all hear and flat out laughing at her. At this point, I stood up, grabbed my basket, walked over near them and quietly said, "Come on, quit it." They both stop laughing and get beet red with anger. One of them then says, "Excuse me, who the frick are you?" I calmly replied, "It takes a lot of time for me to get mad. She's obviously upset, she can hear you over here, and it's embarrassing for you and her." That's when they both lose it, saying, "Who the frick are you? Who the frick do you think you are? Don't ever talk to me like that," etc. To which I replied, "Listen, I know you're both really unhappy because you married a man for money and now he's cheating on you with much younger women, and your kids probably don't respect or like you because you're obviously crappy people, but you don't have to be mean to strangers. If you want to laugh, whatever, but don't start mocking people. Try to contain yourselves and act like the adults you've never had to become." They were shocked. It was really funny. They said, "We're not paying for this," and just walked out, leaving their food behind. Then the checkout clerk just started laughing, and the guy behind me went, Frick yeah. I kinda think I did a bit of an overkill, but I was really shocked at how mean they were being. This one I find easier to believe because these people actually refused to believe they were wrong or to learn anything. And yes, it was a bit of an overkill, but honestly, if you're going to laugh openly at a struggling person that way, then you deserve anything that's coming to you. Went to see the Wolverine movie in a really big theater. About halfway up the row of seats, it had an aisle that cut across horizontally from one side of the theater to the other. Some butthead father was there with a toddler, and he let that kid run back and forth across the aisle, squealing the whole time. I put up with it for about 30 minutes, and then finally went down to the father and said, "Do you realize the entire theater can hear your child and that it's ruining the movie for the rest of us? Please make him be quiet." The father stared at me in complete shock, as if the concept had never crossed his mind. He left immediately with his kid. Several people around me said thank you as I sat down. One time I was at a show in Philly. It was in between bands, and everyone was milling around outside the venue. As I was standing talking to some friends, I noticed 5 or 6 wannabe hardcore kids harassing this homeless guy. They were kind of pushing him around, forcing him to take pictures with them and talking down to him. Eventually, the guy slumps down on a wall, pulling his knees up and starts crying as these guys are degrading him more and more. One of them shoves his camera phone in the guy's face, saying he's going to make him famous on YouTube. At this point, I've seen and heard enough and I just lose it. I don't remember exactly what I said, but I remember flipping on these guys for about 5 minutes, along the lines of how that guy has nothing and you have everything compared to him, yet you're worthless. How disgusting what they were doing was, how sad and pathetic they were. I didn't care that it was 5 or 6 guys who could probably together beat my face in. I knew there was no threat towards the end of my tirade when they were all staring at the ground, red in the face, clearly ashamed of what they did. As my verbal berating ended, I was greeted to applause from everywhere. I helped the old guy up and took him to Wawa and bought him some dinner. He was weeping on the way there, thanking me, saying he'd never had anyone stick up for him his entire life, and how I came out of nowhere to help him. It felt good, man. I was helping my grandparents run errands one day, and while my grandfather, who was injured during test fire in France during the war, he had stood up to get out of the store mechanized wheelchair so that he could use the ATM, some 19-year-old thug walked up and sat down in it. I gave him 3 polite versions of, "He's using that," before he responded, "Chill out, I'll get up in a minute." I started to explain that I wanted the chair available in case he lost his balance or anything, then thought better of it, instead staring homeboy in the eyes with a deadpan, "Get up, mother fricker." To which the guy responded with a, "Who do you think you're talking to?" I told him, "I'm talking to you, mother fricker, get up now." He responded with, "Who you talking to?" again. Note that if the person isn't scared of you the first time you say it, it's just going to make you look dumb. At this point, he still hadn't gotten up, so I rushed the cart, fully intending to flip it over, and when homie saw that I was serious, he jumped up and started muttering about how I'd better hope he never saw me again. As a side note, my grandfather was 91 and looks just like Jimmy Carter, except maybe a little more unassuming, and I don't think I've ever seen him prouder than he was at that moment. In college, for a Spanish class I was taking, I had the opportunity to see a foreign film for extra credit. I had to take notes during the film, so I could write a brief summary of the movie to turn into my Spanish professor. The movie was playing in one of our big lecture halls by the Foreign Film Club at my school, so there were a lot of students there watching. I get to my seat, settle in and start watching the movie. About 10 minutes in, 2 girls enter the hall and proceed to make a lot of noise like nothing is going on at all. They take their seats in my same row, but on the other side of the aisle. They continue talking for the next 10 to 15 minutes loudly while the movie is playing, not giving any Fs. I can tell people around me are annoyed with subtle ahem and groans and multiple head turns to look at the girls, but no one really does anything and the girls keep talking. Finally, I've had it. I get up and walk over to the girls and ask them in the most polite voice I could muster, as I was very annoyed, "Please excuse me, ladies, for interrupting your conversation. Would you mind shutting the frick up so the rest of us can watch the film?" I just stood there and they got very angry and left. The entire lecture hall applauded and the movie went on. There were no more interruptions and I left that place feeling 10 feet tall. It was well worth the 25 extra credit points. I once told off a customer in a retail store for being rude and mean. She had made one of my staff cry, she was so awful. The general gist of what I said was, "Do you feel better about yourself after you made the 17-year-old girl cry? Was it really necessary? Until you learn to treat others with respect, I don't want to see you in my store again. Leave before I call security." It's shocking how rude people are, and not just the younger generation. When I was working at Target in high school, I dealt with extremely rude people all the time. Usually I'd just give them the benefit of the doubt and assume they were having a bad day or something, but I've had things thrown at me while I was sitting at the customer service desk, being called a racist, screamed at, you name it. It's awful. I feel for anyone working in that environment. I went off on someone who pushed their shopping cart towards the little corrals, but it ended up going off course and hitting a parked car. They didn't bother to look or put the cart away properly. I also went off on someone who slammed their car door into the parked car next to them, several times, because apparently they parked too close. The lady doing the door slamming was parked over the line, and the vandalized car was dead center of the spot. I took down her license plate number, went into the store, found the owner of the other car, and let them know. Health inspectors. What's the worst violation you've ever seen? Former inspector here, I once discovered a rat infestation in the kitchen of a hospital. They asked me if I could prove my suspicions, and I pointed out the numerous foodstuffs with 1 to 2 inch circular holes chewed in them, but they didn't seem convinced. I showed them the trail of droppings and footprints coming and going from a hole in the floor drain, but they still didn't seem convinced. I showed them the 3 dead rats I discovered under and around equipment. I think they began to believe me at that point. Citations included rat infestation and absolutely deplorable cleaning practices. Used to have a job working as an inspector for storage tanks at places like dairies and factories. Went to a cheesecake factory, an actual factory for cheesecakes, not the restaurant chain, to test a milk storage tank. It had just been cleaned and was being prepped to be filled with a tanker full of milk. I noticed the floor of the tank was covered in bleach. It turned out the floor manager couldn't be asked to spend the time sucking out the rest of the cleaning fluid used in the cleaning process and, as a standard, just filled the tank with milk on top of dozens of gallons of bleach. His theory was that there was enough milk to dilute the bleach to acceptable consumption levels. I wrote a report and he was promptly fired. By the way, my 12-gallon estimate is just that, an estimate. It was a huge milk storage silo, 40,000 liters if I recall, and roughly half an inch of the floor of the tank was covered in cleaning fluid. The dilutions we're talking about probably wouldn't have been harmful or even tasteable after being pasteurized and mixed with cheesecake ingredients. But that's also a guess, and it's also not the point. My gosh, you already went through the trouble of cleaning it. What the heck was an extra 5 minutes to properly finish the job? Glad he got fired. It was something to do with the extra attachment he'd need to use for the nozzle, or something. Either way, it would have been an extra 30 minutes of work. Something, had he observed, would have kept his job and a clean criminal record. In 2004, 2005, around that time, I drank some milk that had been in a similar situation. Machine wasn't rinsed after cleaning. I was a toddler and got hospitalized. How often does this crap happen? Worked in a restaurant. Sitting in the office one day, I hear an awful squeaking/shrieking noise. Took me a little while to find the source. The source turned out to be a mouse, stuck in some old spilled pancake syrup under a storage shelf, being eaten alive by the mouse stuck next to it. I have had to edit out the several minutes of gagging and string of expletives that I just uttered after imagining that story. You're welcome, viewers. Did food safety inspection at a large slaughterhouse for a while. We did our own inspections each shift and the government inspector stopped by once a day too. One day I came around a corner and one of the workers who was running service for the butchers had dropped a ham on the floor. So the proper way to handle this was for him to leave it there and call for a re-inspector to come pick it up, take it out to carve off any contaminated bits, and rinse it in boiling water. Now, it relatively often happened meat was dropped on the floor, it's just very, very hard to avoid it when running in a factory setting with human labor. So this was common. What was uncommon was what the guy did. First, he tried catching it as it fell, which would have been fine. No contact with any surface, and he could have just thrown it back into the tub it had fallen out of. He didn't catch it though, it landed on the floor. Thinking that no one was watching, he tried picking it up and dropped it again. He did this 3 times, so first and foremost, he's not supposed to be touching anything that's been on the floor. It cross-contaminates his hands, and he has nowhere to put the contaminated product anyway. But he did this 3 times, and dropped it 3 times. Freshly carved hams can be slippery when wearing vinyl gloves. He then, out of pure frustration and annoyance at the unwieldy ham, dropped down on all 4s and proceeded to pick up the raw, freshly cut, 6-kilo ham by his teeth. Stood up, ham dangling from his chompers, and dropped it into the tub with around 600 kilos of product, and drove off with the tub for processing. He was fired a few minutes after that, and the entire tub of product was discarded. I followed him and let him park the tub before I did a very cliché type of scene. I wish you'd interrupted him while he had the ham in his mouth. Well, yes and no. Had he picked up the ham by his teeth and carried it to the grinder for disposal, Technically, he had just packed up contaminated product and had to change his clothes and gloves. Of course, carrying anything in your mouth, whatever it fricking is, doesn't fly. But a straight, no prior warning, firing? I'm not so sure. Probably though, that wouldn't have been up to me. But when he put it in with the clean product and drove it off to processing, that shows a complete disregard for any sort of understanding of what you should and should not do when working with food. He had made the decision himself even before I dragged him into the office of the shift director. There was no other option. Not a health inspector, but a Chinese buffet near me was closed down because it got a 0 out of 5 in its inspection. I got food poisoning from there once. The staff just got up and left. Locked the door, never went back. All the food was still out and everything. A week later, a man was walking his dog past said Chinese buffet and heard a loud buzzing noise. Looked through the window to see hundreds of thousands of flies had taken to the building as their new home. It was so bad that Pizza Hut next door had to close too. To anyone asking, this was in Gloucester, England. God damn, get a flamethrower in there. Pools that have absolutely no chlorine. Pedicure tubs filters that have never been changed. All their disinfectants were expired. A restaurant that refused to clean up pest feces or urine and refused to properly reheat foods. The kitchen had exposed wood everywhere. Well, it would be exposed if there wasn't a thick layer of grease and no sanitizer. The pools that have no chlorine things happens all the time. As a former pool manager, I can tell you almost right away too when I get unchlorinated water. Chlorine is volatile and will dissipate quickly, especially when it's sunny out. If you're running an outdoor pool and not constantly monitoring the chlorine concentration and the feeds, it will turn into a pond in about 6 hours. At that point, you're just taking a bath with everyone in your town. Also, really shallow baby pool? You can be almost sure that at least once a day it has no chlorine in it. When you're dealing with less than 1,000 gallons, that thing will vacillate like crazy. Well, thank you for that. If you'll all excuse me, I'll just be busy never swimming again in another pool for the rest of my life. In fact, after reading most of these, maybe I'll just never leave my house. When my son was 5 or so, we had a nanny who used to look after him, and she used to take him to a local pub where one of her friends worked. He got used to sitting at the bar, eating a packet of crisps, and drinking a soda. I'm starting to realize as I recount this, as it doesn't reflect too well on my parenting skills. Oh well, he's 17 now, so I guess it's too late for social service to come and take him away. Anyway, the nanny was great, no matter what you might say. The nanny and her friend were around the corner in the other bar, chatting away, when a couple of besuited gentlemen wandered into the bar. My son was laying a line of crisps along the bar, and one of the gents started talking to him. It's worth noting that the regulars in the bar were used to him being there, and often referred to him as the boss. They let him pour drinks and so on, ostensibly under the supervision of the bar staff. Needless to say, it's illegal for 5-year-olds to be employed as bar staff, even in the UK. "I'm in charge here. Would you like a drink?" offered my son, scooting around the back of the bar. No, it's okay, thanks. What are the crisps for?" "Oh, I'm feeding my friend," my son replied. "Really? Where's your friend?" "He lives in that little hole." My son pointed to a hole in the wall toward the end of the bar. "And sometimes he comes out and I feed him." On cue, a small mouse appeared out of the hole, ran along the bar, and started eating the crisps. The men were environmental health officers. The pub was shut down that week and never reopened. Luckily, they weren't police, otherwise the nanny's friend would have been in serious trouble. This story was pieced together from the report of the nanny and also my son, who thought the whole thing was hilarious. The nanny's friend was quite relieved as she hated the job anyway. My favorite Chinese restaurant got shut down. My ex-wife worked for the city, and I asked her what the deal was. She said the health inspectors found something leaking from the ceiling. They lifted the ceiling tile and shined a flashlight and saw multiple eyes staring back at them. It was chickens. They were raising chickens in the ceiling, and chicken crap was dripping into the food that I had been eating at least once a week. How do I get out of this chicken crap outfit? You secure that crap, Hudson. My dad worked pest control, and after working that job, he can no longer eat Chinese food. He said that nearly every Chinese restaurant he had to work in was disgusting and crawling with roaches. But the one that took the cake was when he had to strip down in the kitchen after a ceiling tile broke and roaches fell into his overalls. My dad did pest control. I went to hang out with him one night, and he took me to a Chinese food restaurant. When we were done eating, he was lingering over his tea, and I was like, "Hey, Dad, looks like they're closing up soon. I think we're keeping the folks from getting done." He's cool and calm. It'll be fine. So we sit. He pays the bill, and we wait. Finally, they're shutting off the lights out front, and I'm losing my mind. I'm horrified, embarrassed, and I'm thinking, these poor people. Finally, Dad stands up and says, "Be right back." He comes back in with his gear. He proceeds to treat the place for their rat problem and the roaches. He gets me to help him carry and move stuff so he can do his job, and doesn't see any problem with this. In conclusion, Pest Control Dad treats a restaurant for nasties right after we eat there. My stepdad used to be a baker in an authentic recreation of an 18th century New French fortress. Because they sell bread to the public, the health inspector came by and she was ripping into my stepdad for violations like the stonework walls, the doorless entryways, or the lack of mosquito zappers. He pointed out that they were following the highest standards except for things that would destroy the authenticity of his 18th century bakery. The health inspector relented and agreed to give him a pass after verifying the food storage area was secure. They went to the shed, which was a doorless building attached to the bakery. As the health inspector went in, there happened to be an escaped cow licking all the loaves. My stepdad could only say, honestly, this never happens. They passed the health inspection. In conclusion, health inspector witnesses escaped farm animal licking all the bread in a bakery and passes the health inspection anyway. Does your stepdad live in a sitcom? That would explain a lot. Like the laugh track that plays any time he cracks a joke, even if it starts only the two of you in the room. My name is Cow, and when at night, or when the moon is shining bright, and all the men have gone to bed, I stay up late, I lick the bread. My friend was inspecting a restaurant and walked out the back to find a man stirring a huge pot of curry, with his arm. No spoon or anything, just up to his hairy elbows in curry. I'd be more worried about how cold the curry is that he was able to stick his arm in it. Most people in the food industry have insane tolerance to heat. I've not worked in a commercial kitchen for some time and I can still pick up a pan out of the oven with my fingertips for a brief period of time. Can confirm, people would warn me that something was too hot to touch and I'd be like, it's cool, I have waitress hands. Or alternatively, fire cannot kill the dragon. I like to think it's more a case of working in the service industry kills your will to live, so you become indifferent to the plates burning your hands. As a man with asbestos hands, I can confirm, coffee machines, kitchens, and hot plates will give you a D&D-style fiendish resistance to fire. However, on the topic of stirring curry with one's own arm, you are likely better off leaving it to tools. Unless you're the following commenters. Is there a different way to stir curry? Well, only if you're really well hung. I had a health inspector tell me this story. There was a family in which both the elderly mother and a handicapped sibling used wheelchairs. Another sibling lived in the house with them and did all the driving, etc. The health department got a phone call from the local wheelchair company. The brother stopped by and picked up a new, custom-built wheelchair for his sister and for his mother, and returned within about 30 minutes, saying that the sister's wheelchair hadn't been made to the right specifications. It was too small. After he left, the staff noticed several roaches on the chair, so the guy got a call. Apparently, it was summer, Midwest, both hot and humid, and the house was all locked up with no open windows for ventilation, curtains drawn, etc. The inspector entered the house and said it was so stifling hot that he started to get dizzy, and he thought hallucinate. He said there was a sound like leaves rustling in the fall, and the walls and floors were kind of vibrating. He then realized it was because they were literally covered in roaches. He immediately evacuated the 3 people living there, and the next day they tented and sprayed the house. He went in a Tyvek suit and knee-high rubber boots, and said that the dead roaches were about 2.5 feet deep in most parts of the house. I work in a bar in Japan that was connected to a bowling alley and an A&W. Mostly Japanese work there. I'm American, and that place was spotless. Every night at 11 when they left there, they were scrubbing everything. I almost stepped on a guy cleaning the baseboards. You could taste the difference in the food because they kept everything so nice. My girlfriend started working in a frozen yogurt shop. The first week, she decided to clean the yogurt machine one night. The entire inside tank was covered in slimy green and brown mold. Oh, and the shop next door was a hoity-toity gym that catered to mirror-gazing health nut gym rats that just loved that low-cal slime mold yogurt. I haven't eaten frozen yogurt since. When I went to culinary school, one of the professors made the statement, "If you want to know how clean a restaurant's kitchen is, go to the bathroom first before you're seated. If the bathroom is dirty, there's a good chance the kitchen is in the same condition." This is what I do when I enter dives. It's a hell of a lot harder to clean a kitchen than a restroom. If you can't do that, you can be damn sure they don't give a frick about the difficult stuff. While this works for restaurants, it does not work for bars or pubs, except at 11 a.m. A pub's restroom goes really filthy about 15 minutes after the drinking starts. There's dirty, and then there's dirty. Superficial, day-old dirt looks quite different from consistent neglect. Not a health inspector, but my mum used to work at this restaurant where the owner just did not give a crap. It was a Mexican restaurant, and my mum told me once that a lady came in asking for caldo de res, a beef soup, but they didn't have any more meat, at least the one that's used for that dish. They were about to let the lady know when the owner stepped up and told the lady that her food would be right out. The server and my mum were both confused as to what she was going to do. Well, this lady goes and literally digs through the fricking trash and pulls out some beef, some still with bone, and then she ran it through water, cooked it, and served it to that poor lady. My mum says the lady was even sucking the bone and she almost felt sick watching. My mum quit that job soon after. After writing this, I asked my mum again about it, and here is what she said. The bone/meat was not raw, it was left over from people who had ordered the same thing. They'd almost run out of that soup, and all the meat was gone, so they thought they couldn't serve anymore. The owner grabbed the bone from the trash, rinsed it and threw it back in what was left of the soup, heated up for a bit, and just served it. Just thought I needed to clarify this. I've worked at places that have gotten 100% on multiple occasions. The inspectors are usually the same few people in smaller areas and get to know people in the restaurants. If you have a good reputation, they come in and check the basics, give you a couple of soft infractions, and move on. If you have something that is a major violation, they will start to, rightfully, nitpick everything. I'm hearing a ton of horror stories and just want to point out something about my experience. I've worked at places the inspectors were easy on because they knew it was clean and had a good reputation. I've worked at one place that ended up having to get a follow-up and quit it soon after. That was the only time I'd seen anything too sketchy. I also worked at a place that regularly got 100% ratings, and let me tell you, we were not 100%. The owner wouldn't do crap to improve conditions either. Mice, several kind of bugs, ceiling literally leaking nasty-ass water, on some areas onto the food prep areas, and once the walk-in cooler broke for an entire 24-hour period, and he said to just keep the food like it didn't happen. If my experience in the restaurant business has told me anything, it's that all restaurants are freaking disgusting. But they won't get you sick most of the time, so if you don't think about it, it'll all be okay. Yep, I've worked in places that honestly were bursting at the seams with unsafe and unsanitary infractions just waiting to happen. Worked in some of them for years and somehow never saw a report on them. I worked as an assistant cook in a restaurant. 2 weeks into the job, I opened a cupboard to get a can of tomato sauce, and I see a huge tarantula scuttling away behind the cans. I told the boss what I'd seen, so that maybe we should get someone to deal with the huge spider living in the kitchen. Boss turns to me and says, "I see you've met Eduardo. Just don't put your hand too close to him, and you'll be good." Later, another cook proceeded to tell me that the spider had been living in there for 2 years, and they allowed it because it kept the rodents and roaches away. This is a true story, so know this. Every time you think about swatting a spider, remember that there's a possibility that a friendly spider is guarding your favorite restaurant's food against nasty critters. The spiders in my house and I have a verbal agreement that is pasted onto every generation of spider that takes up residency in my house. You may remain in my house as long as you don't come upstairs and you keep the ants, flies, and other household bugs that aren't you out of my house. I reserve the right to eliminate you and your webs at will without proper notice. I haven't had an ant in 4 years. I've had a few flies, but they seem to only be upstairs where the spiders aren't allowed. I've killed very few spiders. It's a good arrangement. Not a health inspector, but I've witnessed some things at my first job as a set-up waitress at a banquet hall. The head cook had some hairy arms and he always mixed the salad with his hands. So you know that hair is getting in there, and one day we found a used Band-Aid in the salad. I survived the assassination attempt. My stepmother is the lead health inspector for a decent-sized suburban town. While I've never asked what the worst thing she witnessed as part of her job was, I do know that one instance was pretty gross. A truck full of lobsters was traveling down the highway and crashed. The police came and eventually they towed the truck. As a Board of Health inspector, my stepmother was consulted to see if any of the lobsters were viable, and she told them no. The load is a total loss since there were literally lobsters scattered across the highway covered in dirt and sand, etc. Fast forward 24 hours and one of the restaurants in town ran a special, twin lobsters for $19. Apparently the owner of the trucking and towing company knew the restaurant owner pretty well, so they made a deal whereby the restaurant would pay a very discounted price for the road lobsters. The restaurant would turn around and illegally serve the lobsters to unsuspecting customers or sell them out of a truck behind the restaurant. I'm not sure what the repercussions were, but I think they were shut down for like a week. They closed shortly thereafter, and now there's a new restaurant there. The towing company lost their contract to tow vehicles and semi-trucks with the town and the state. It's crazy that they didn't think the health inspector would figure it out. It's their job. Mysteriously cheap lobster after a huge highway crash involving lobsters? I thought that there would be insurance for things like lobster crashes. And now I realize how ridiculous that was as I typed it. Never mind. You aren't covered for lobster crashes on your insurance plan? Weird. Insurance agent here. If you buy lobster crash insurance, we will find a way to not pay anything at all. It was an act of cod. Close enough. Talking 10 years as an inspector. Most dangerous is usually not the most disgusting. I've seen entire walk-in coolers at 55 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit, and the staff didn't even notice anything wrong. I've seen piles of mice that died getting stuck in grease behind the fryer. I've seen staff throwing raw burgers within the grill, then making a salad right after with their bare hands. I've seen squirrels and birds roaming freely inside a bread manufacturer. The stereotypes, unfortunately, are true. Chinese restaurants are almost always filthy. The most common critical violation? Dish machine not sanitizing properly. What's the most petty, passive-aggressive move you've ever played? I just hit the passive-aggressive zenith. Played a YouTube video of someone eating crisps loudly while someone else ate crisps loudly, because I can't be bothered to ask them to stop. Basically, this guy is one of those people who manages to do everything that is annoying. Whether it's banging desks, talking loudly on the phone, laughing loudly, munching crisps with his mouth open, etc., all distracting in our very small office. I'm not saying I'm not a prick, but I'm tired of picking the guy up on things he should be able to work out for himself. Has anyone else surprised themselves with their own petty behavior? As pointed out, it probably isn't properly passive-aggressive. The reason I didn't directly approach the guy is because I've done it so many times with so many other things that he's becoming combative and resistant. I'm tired of getting into semi-pissy debates, and I'm at the point where I think he should start actively taking responsibility for the things he does in the small office we share. I always ask if people mind if I put on music or close curtains, etc. I was on the receiving end of some epic passive aggression once. I was in the 12 items or less line at the grocery store, and as usual had counted my items before I got in the line. An older couple got in line behind me and clearly did not think I had done so. They spoke loudly to each other, I guess hoping to embarrass me. "That doesn't look like 12 items to you, does it, Marge?" etc. This continued on, and when it was my turn, one started, "Let's count. 1, 2, 3. I started wondering if maybe I miscounted, feeling a little panicky as I usually try not to be a D-bag. Then finally, 10. Oh! The cashier laughed. I needed to do nothing. The backfiring of their plan was plenty. Although I now look on that situation with that single regret. I should have also written a check, asked for paper and plastic, and for rolls of quarters. Darn it. I would have grabbed 3 packs of gum and put them on the belt with my stuff just to screw with them after that little act. I used to be a resident advisor in a college dorm. One of the dorm activities was on personal hygiene, with free stuff available like deodorant, shampoo, razors, etc. One of my residents couldn't be bothered to speak with his roommate about his disgusting habits, but he sure took about a dozen of those flyers and put them up all over his roommate's side of the room. Ah, that's like a lower effort version of the good old post-it note. Best friend of any passive-aggressive flatmate. The neighbor in my girlfriend's apartment will let their gosh darn alarm go off for like a good 5 minutes before they even try to stop it. They don't hit snooze like a normal person. They just lay there and let it buzz over and over and over again. It was going on longer than usual, so I ended up pulling out my phone and turning on the meltdown alarm and basically pressing it directly into the wall. On top of the horrendously loud noise, it was also buzzing the whole wall. They turned their alarm off within 10 seconds and haven't done it since. If this ever happens again, get a screaming mini alarm clock from any truck stop. It's 110 decibels of get the frick out of bed. Treat it like a grenade. Set it for 1 minute, it's a timer, and toss it in their window. It's brought people to tears because they couldn't turn it off. Oh, thank you for that wonderful idea. My neighbors don't have a problem with their 16-year-old son and his idiot friends going out at 2 a.m. drunk as frick in their backyard, yelling and screaming till the sun comes up. Nobody around will say anything because I live with a bunch of old fricks and I don't want them damaging my car. So I just ordered one of these. This Sunday, I'm throwing it in their yard the second they decide to go in, because they always go out every weekend and do this crap. It's going to be so worth the money, even if I have to do it every weekend. My old roommate's friend always used to come over and drink my cans of Pepsi. I'm on a pretty tight budget, but like to treat myself with said cans, so you can imagine how upset this made me. One day I hid all the cans but one, which I coated with nail biter. The second he realized something was wrong, he poured himself a glass of water using the only glass on the drying rack, the glass coated in nail biter. I live on a typical American suburb street. My neighbor just got a new job with a company-provided vehicle. He has a one-lane driveway, so he parks this huge work van in the road, directly in front of my house. It's all I can see when I look out the front window. I casually mention it to him now, so that he could park it in front of his house and not mine. He just chuckles to himself and starts talking about something else. For the next week, I parked my car in front of his house to see if he enjoyed looking at my car every day. Luckily, he got the message and now parks in front of his home and not mine. Something similar is happening where I live. I live at the end of a cul-de-sac in the corner, and the guy in the middle of the end parks one of his cars outside his house, blocking our driveway to the point where we have to snake around his car in reverse. Meanwhile, his other car sits in his driveway that is thin but long enough for 2 cars. Did I also mention that both he and his wife are retired and rarely leave the house? We have other neighbors with similar situations, so everyone keeps moving their cars like a game of chess to park in front of each other's houses to annoy each other. They are all gradually getting more and more teed off with each other, and just when they are at the tipping point, I'm soon to be adding a new car to the scenario. I will park it in the worst place and watch the drama. Skip passive-aggressive, go fully aggressive. Buy a beta car, spend under $500. Insure minimally. Put the beta in your driveway. Wait until your neighbor blocks your driveway. Nail the neighbor's car. Blame the neighbor for being parked in front of your driveway. Take no responsibility. Repeat until the point has been made. Sell the beta for whatever you paid for it. I blow kisses to angry drivers. I'm a guy. On an airplane flight this past summer, the guy in front of me reclined his seat until he was practically resting his head on my chest. I politely asked him if he would please put his seat up. He just looked at me and said no. I then turned my air vent on full blast, aimed it right at his face. When he reached up to adjust it, I pushed his hand away. "Excuse me, that's my air vent. I like it that way." He ended up leaning forward the entire flight, but left his seat reclined practically to my chest. We were both uncomfortable the entire flight, but neither of us would give in. As my wife put it, "So this is what happens when an inconsiderate butthole meets a passive-aggressive pee-pee." Later, several people have called bullcrap on my claim that the seat tilted back all the way to my chest. I'm 5'10" and my legs aren't long so that my knees will touch the seat in front of me. For that reason, I don't usually have a problem with people in front of me leaning back. I don't really enjoy it, but it's not a big deal. I don't know if this guy's seat was broken or if it was some sort of sleeper sofa unit that belonged in a long-haul flight or what, but I ended up looking down on that guy's face like I was his dentist. It sucked. I was at Costco once and they had massage chairs at the end of the aisle, right by the crutches and folding wheelchairs, etc. 2 older women were complaining about me using it, making remarks about how I was abusing the equipment or some crap, so I struggled to get off the chair, gave a look of pain and wheeled off in one of the wheelchairs. I kept one of my hands shaking and went right past them. Their faces were one of the best things ever. In conclusion, use muscular dystrophy to screw with someone. Oh my god. I think the most perverse part of this account is that even from the way the author has written it, I'm not 100% sure one way or the other whether they actually have that particular disability or any disability at all. I just hope the ladies in question feel terrible regardless. I was watching Batman at a theater and the kid sitting in front of me kept rocking his seat back and knocking me in the knees. I asked him to stop, he glared, then stopped for 5 minutes. But he started again and kept intentionally rocking it back to hit my knees. So I put my foot at the base of the chair so he couldn't rock it backwards. He turns around, glares at me, and mutters, "B-word." This kid couldn't have been older than 11, so I let him keep rocking and waited until he was winding back to rock it really hard. Then, when he was at his apex, I kicked the back of the seat hard. It smacked him in the head and he whiplashed forward. Needless to say, he didn't lean back for the rest of the movie. In conclusion, I kicked a kid in the back of the head, and I'm not entirely certain what passive-aggressive means. You delivered the kick that the kid needed, but not the one he wanted. Some men just want to watch the chairs rock.
He merely adopted the chair. You were born in it.
Let me tell you how I got this whiplash.
When you lean back, You have my permission to die.
There's these two girls who sit behind me in one of my classes that don't shut up. No matter what my professor says, they always have to talk about it between the two of them. After doing this, it's always leading into longer discussions between them. It's freaking annoying because I'm actually interested in what my professor has to say. He tells some pretty interesting stories. One day, I'd had enough of it. When they started talking again, I took my laptop out and made a new Word document. I made the font large enough to where they'd be able to read it and typed 4 simple words. Shut the frick up. I cleared my throat very loudly, I should add, and just slightly moved out of the way to where they would be able to read it. That was 2 weeks ago, and they haven't said a word in class since. I had the same problem in my philosophy class. For about a week, I would type everything that they said. At the end of the week, I handed them each a transcript of their conversations. I pulled the same thing last finals period. I was on the quiet floor of our student center, where not even the laptops are allowed. The clicking of the keyboard is too loud. There was this girl furiously typing on her laptop and having a cell phone conversation about her child termination. It was very, very distracting, and no amount of throat clearing and angry looks got her attention. So I scribbled, "Shut the frick up," in Sharpie on my notebook, coughed loudly, and held it up for her to see. She got up and left, and I got a very enthusiastic round of golf claps. In college, I had the worst roommate. She would stay up all night, sleep all day long, and dramatically sigh or groan if I accidentally woke her up by, being in my dorm room during the day. She also could not shut up for about 5 minutes. She literally wandered around our room muttering to herself mostly, "Frick!" and "Jesus Christ!" And if she wasn't doing that, she was sighing and groaning and slamming drawers shut. She also left food that should have been refrigerated out on her desk for weeks at a time, including stacks of burgers still in their paper wrapping. It smelled. Anyway, she mentioned once how she hated living in the dorms because she couldn't smoke in there. I casually brought up how my last roommate broke her contract and moved into a house mid-semester, and she just loved it. New roommate got excited and started to look into getting an apartment. What I didn't mention was that it costs $1,000 plus that month's dorm fee to break said contract, and apparently she managed to sign up for this without noticing that fine print either, because for about a week after she had screaming matches on the phone with her mum about the money. A week later she was gone and I had the room to myself for the rest of the semester. It was great. I would feel bad, but living with a frantic, swearing, sleep-deprived burger hoarder was too much for me. In conclusion, talked Oscar the Grouch into breaking room contract, resulting in unforeseen expenses on her part. Oofed. I mean, she was probably outright told by student housing that it would cost her money, so hopefully decided to move despite that fact of life. It just sucks that it sounds like her mother had to foot the bill. Mine is a painful memory to relive, but I'll do it for the sake of this thread. Me and my then-university roommate shared this tiny room with one double-decker bed, a cupboard, 2 tables, and a mirror. The mirror is depressingly important in this story. It was opposite the bed so that I, sleeping on the top bunk, could actually see what my roommate was doing underneath. You know where this is going. So one day I woke up to this horrible squelching sound. In my mind, I knew what it was. I just didn't want to entertain the idea. It must not be that. It can't be. Furtively, I glanced at the mirror, knowing that the reflection would take a little bit of my soul with it. Sure enough, it was my roommate, under my bunk, pumping vigorously in his boxers. I have never seen anyone beat it that feverishly. It was almost beautiful in some sick, perverse way. Okay, so the problem was that he kept doing this. I kept waking up to the sound of the guy who watches Matrix Reloaded daily, frantically beating off in his boxers. Even worse, sometimes he'd let out an ugh sound that chills me to this day. I cannot watch Japanese adult flicks because of him. I didn't even know what to do. Should I accept my fate and consider this morning jerk session as some kind of cruel alarm clock? One fateful day I was woken up to the usual squelching sound, and I decided to do something about it. I just cleared my throat. He immediately stopped. And it was then that he knew I knew. We never spoke again, and he moved the following semester. You fricker. I know you're on Reddit. If you're reading this, I'm going to come and spank the monkey in front of you one day. Drunk. You mother fricker. I wish I'd employed a similar passive-aggressive tactic on the guy who sits directly behind me. He's insanely annoying, such that he's infamously never sat with his actual team. They rush to fill any seats that come free. And there's a long list of people who've said, "If you sit me near him, I will quit. Seriously." Highlights include, he seems to have old smoker's lung/throat problems, such that his voice always escapes as a gurgled squeal. He can't help that, but he shouts, of course, so it's akin to sharing the room with a banshee. He spends hours per day cramming Bombay mix into his mouth. He then chews it with his front teeth for maximum crunch volume. He'll still use the phone or shout at people while eating. Farts openly and often. Has an incredibly loud and annoying SMS received tone, which needless to say is triggered several times per hour, sometimes many times a minute as he conducts some sort of his extracurricular activities exclusively by SMS. Of course, his desk phone habits are annoying too. Keypad tones set to on, volume set to max, and he opens many conversations using the speaker setting. He has dozens of keys plus his security tags on a long chain which he slaps and drags about on his desk, like he's a fricking poltergeist. That's right, he's a banshee and a poltergeist. I cracked after weeks of this and told him to shut the frick up. On a Friday morning when he was screeching at the team opposite solidly for an hour telling his version of what passes for a joke. He responded with abuse, so I went unpunished, but I still know I made a mistake being aggressive and swearing at work. On second thoughts, I wish I'd killed him with a stapler. I'm a live sound tech. My job's success rate depends on me being passive-aggressive. Oh, you turned your guitar amp up again? Cool, I hope you like me cranking the crap out of your guitar in your monitors now, butthead. I've been to shows where the band members straight up sit there and yell at the techs. Isn't that someone you should be polite to, considering they can make your entire set sound like crap? I've been yelled at from some idiot on stage for problems they were creating. Oh, not to mention a room full of people between us. I muted his mics, sipped on a beer, and stood there and smiled at him as he had a tantrum. Does this count? Drunk buttholes being loud outside residence buildings at some ungodly hour on a Sunday night. Hey, do you guys ever watch? A watch? Yeah, I need to know what time it is. 3:30. Okay, cool. Now that you know that it's 3:30, can you shut the frick up? Oh yeah, this one. Had a guy watering his garden at 2:30 a.m. once, in the summer, when you have your windows open. I leaned out. Hey mate, why don't you water your garden at 4 a.m. like normal people? Whenever some butthole is tailgating me on the road, I hit the windshield cleaner button and just hold it. Usually, I can get a good consistent spray of water to obstruct their view. They usually change lanes after that. Bonus points for me if their windshield is dirty and their wipers are bad, leaving behind a dirty, muddy mess. Also, if you're all in on this idea, you can take a pin and adjust the angle on one of your nozzles to spray directly over your car for maximum effectiveness. I had a wagon and it had a rear view sprayer, so I pulled it out and found the best angle to hit tailgaters right in the window. It was awesome. People would either get super mad and go into a rage, or most of the time start laughing and back off. I mean, I can't possibly condone this, as you could cause a crash if they're particularly jumpy and unprepared, but it is damn funny, and I'd be tempted to try it. I put 3 staples in my stapler at a time so people will stop using the one on my desk. There's an empty desk right next to me with a fully loaded stapler no one ever uses. I realize this is ridiculous. I was in Walmart once and this kid was screaming. I tried to ignore it. I thought about asking the parent to quiet the kid down. You could hear him through the whole store. Finally, I just stood at the end of the aisle they were on and started screaming back at him. The mother was horrified, but after about 10 seconds of yelling back and forth, the kid finally stopped. My mother would do the same with me when I was a child. Once I threw myself to the ground and started screaming, and she just lay down beside me and watched me with her poker face until I stopped. It worked every time. Every time I was working on a good tantrum, my mother would offer to clear out a space for me on the floor and tell me to let her know when I was finished. The residents at the pool I work at complain about everything, making the shifts that my co-workers and I work extremely trying on our patients. It eventually got to the point where a number of residents petitioned to get one of the guards written up because she was sucking a lollipop in an inappropriate manner while on stand. As head guard of the facility, all of these complaints went to me. Eventually, I got sick of this and took action. What the residents didn't realize up until about halfway through the summer is that the pool they use has a number of small rules that no one really acknowledges, because honestly, it's not worth anyone's time to enforce them. These rules include things such as enforcing designated areas to eat and a sort of blanket ban on alcohol. From July 25th on, under my authority, every guard was required to reprimand all residents on every single infraction, in order to give them a taste of their own medicine. I can honestly say there is nothing more satisfying than having one of my guards stop a hated resident from enjoying a few drinks with whoever they're with, and then looking them right in the eye and just absorbing their hatred. It's sublime. When I was pretty young, maybe 13-ish, my younger brother, 11-ish, kept frustrating me by stealing my CD player, and I was out for clever revenge. We had a CD recorded by a band from the local church called Flying Sheep. Something something Jesus and flying animals, you know the drill. The first track of the CD was 45 seconds of sheep noises. When he went to sleep, I snuck into his room quietly, located my CD player, set it to loop track 1 and turned the volume way down. About every 5 minutes I'd sneak in again and turn the volume up a little more. I did this for about 2 hours until there was nothing but bleating sheep at full volume about 4 feet from his head. My brother slept like a log, so he slept for the whole 7 hours, with sheep noises beamed directly into his brain. He woke up pretty angry. Apparently he had dreamed about trying to herd aggressive sheep all night long. Sweet revenge. If someone is really annoying me with what they're saying, or chewing loudly, smacking gum loudly, or making annoying drum noises with their mouth, I will sometimes turn music on and slowly turn it up to the point where I can't hear them over it. Sometimes I will even look them dead in the eyes while I do it. Well, that's better than my sighing tactic. Bravo! Whenever my roommate shaves, he always leaves little bits of hair in and around the sink. As other people's hair has always made me cringe, I repeatedly asked him to stop, but there would always be hair in the sink. So I waited. For 3 months, I grew my pubic hair to the most glorious length it has ever been and shaved it all off into the sink, and left it. I haven't had any problems with my bathroom since then. In conclusion, a wild bush appeared. The last 4th of July, some friends and I went down to the pier to watch the fireworks. We were sitting down when this couple decided the perfect spot for them was standing directly in front of us. I'd been drinking a bit, so it seemed like a good idea to bark like a dog. Not like a mean pit bull or something, more like a high-pitched chihuahua. I do a really good impression, by the way. They started turning around looking for the dog until they realized it was me. I looked them in the eyes and started barking with an even higher pitch. I think they thought I was crazy because they just whispered to each other and left. The old man sitting next to me gave me a high five. Watching my daughter at gymnastics, woman next to me was smacking her gum like a cow. I pulled out a pen and sat there clicking the button until she got fed up and left. Non-Americans. What misconception did you have about America before visiting or moving there? Well, I recently learned that New York is a state as well as a city, and Washington isn't in Washington. A while back, I was dating this girl from India who was shocked to discover that Seattle was nowhere near DC. The best part about the naming of Washington State is that it was going to be called Columbia, but people at the time thought it would be too confusing, given that the nation's capital was the District of Columbia. This was before DC was mostly known as Washington, so they picked Washington for the state name instead of Columbia, to avoid confusion. My German friends wanted to go into my arsenal and start shooting with all my pieces. When I told them that I didn't have any, they looked at me like I was lying. I've taken several Germans to the range. It's a pretty awesome experience for them. I don't think they really grasp how bloody expensive the ammo is, though. I don't know if it's a misconception, but I expected Grand Canyon National Park to be less well-maintained. Frankly, it's amazing for the amount of visitors. Visited last year, 10 out of 10. You people have an amazing national park service. This year we decided to come back and tackle Yellowstone, next weekend actually. Hats off to the national parks. That is some public sector crap I hope you people decide to keep investing in. For me, more than cities, they are the crown jewels of the US. The amount of public land in the US is unique and incredible. Thank Teddy Roosevelt and John Muir. They were both amazing men that pioneered the vast national parks of North America. It's true, despite the efforts of certain monetarily motivated entities seemingly working as hard as they can to gut the EPA and park services, America still has some incredibly well-maintained hiking trails and natural wonders. Long may they last. This one's a bit off topic, but hear me out. I grew up watching American movies, American media, American everything, and it became this very familiar place that I'd never been to, and it almost seemed like it was fake, like it was all just one big movie set, and people spoke a made-up language I understood but never heard from native speakers in real life. At that point, my view on America was almost disconnected from reality. When finally visiting America, it was completely surreal. Like I was taking part of those fictional movies I'd seen as a kid. I saw landmarks in cities I had only ever seen on screen. It was a crazy experience. I get that. Even for Americans, there are places in the US that can be like that, especially New York City. I thought you Americans ate pizza every Friday. That's why I wanted to go to the USA in the first place. It's America. You can eat pizza every day. And when pizza's on a bagel, you can eat pizza anytime. I thought sheriffs aren't real for some reason, at least not anymore. At least where I am, police equals city, sheriff equals county, state patrol equals state, but mostly highways and interstates. We have a lot of overlapping law enforcements with weird jurisdiction lines and different protocols. Like where I am in California, in a day you might see highway patrol, county sheriff, and the city police department. In lots of places, sheriffs are more likely to use SUVs, while with PD, SUVs are normally for K9, but some departments are using them as well. Being English, I didn't even think about a language barrier. At a football game, it took me about 5 minutes to get a bottle of water. The girl just couldn't understand how I said water. I had to point to one someone else had had in the end. I'm just sitting here giggling and picturing an extremely frustrated Brit standing at a concession stand just repeating, "Water! Water!" over and over again in a fruitless attempt to get a damn drink. It happens to everyone. I'm from Ohio and I went to visit my aunt and uncle in Georgia. I was trying to order a sandwich, but I couldn't understand the question that the waitress was asking me because I couldn't decipher her accent. My sister had to translate for me. It was pretty embarrassing now that I'm thinking about it. Y'all want mustard and mayonnaise on it? I thought people would say yee-haw a lot more. I'm sorry to disappoint. We failed our jobs as Americans, and I deeply apologize. Oh, and yee-haw. My brother in Connecticut deals with people in China and other countries from work all the time, and he started greeting everyone with howdy, specifically in order to perpetuate the stereotype. Honestly, you guys were a lot friendlier than I expected. Even in New York, which seems to pride itself on not giving a frick, I found people to be extremely friendly, polite, and helpful. It's been great hearing everyone's take on this, and now I have a long list of places to visit in America. Fellow New Yorker here can confirm we do give a frick. Quickest way to get a New Yorker to talk to you, you stare at a subway map for more than a minute. The one thing that breaks us out of our do not talk to strangers shell is when helping with directions. I swear, if you ask the quickest way to get to the Empire State Building, 3 of us will jump in front of you to make sure you get there, and 2 of us may debate about which way to go, even though both of our directions are right and it would take the exact same time. If we're really friendly, we'll even give you a tip to skip the Empire State Building altogether and head to the top of the rock. Better views, no chain link fence, and you can actually get that picture in front of the Empire State Building. Something you can't do when you're standing on top of that building. You can also ask, hey, does this train go to 34th Street? Just to get us talking. Honestly, I think that a lot of the infamous East Coast and New York surliness goes out the window when people realize you're British or European as well. But maybe that was an isolated experience for me. I didn't realize those red cups were actually real and used by everyone in the US at parties. I thought it was just like a movie thing. My mum's friend went to the US and brought us back a stack while we were at university. We felt like we were in a teen film, and we even washed them up when we were done so we could use them again. I thought that I'd have no problem communicating because the people there speak a form of English. I've listened to their accents in my media the whole life, etc. Man, was I wrong. I don't think I spoke to a single person who I didn't have to ask to repeat themselves at least once. This was in Orlando. Oh, this sounds stupid. I knew America was big, but when I thought I could drive from New York to Florida pretty easily, I was so wrong. I just didn't quite register how bloody far away everything is. And I was wrong when I thought alligators just lived in the Everglades. Those frickers are everywhere in Florida. How surprisingly cold some parts of Arizona can get. I visited after spending a year in northern Ohio and basically went there naked, as I didn't expect anything could be worse than Cleveland's winter. Nope, I almost froze to death when I went to see the Grand Canyon and it was snowing. Yes, when I went to the Grand Canyon in October, I showed up in shorts and a tank top expecting it to be still and hot, like I was in Phoenix. Nope. Not only was it freezing, but it was the windiest place I've been in my entire life. So beautiful, though. When my parents and I moved from Poland to Texas in 1997, we had no idea Daisy sour cream wasn't a cheese spread. Still have it on sandwiches. On a solo road trip up Route 66, I picked up an 18-year-old Dutch kid on his first trip out of his country. He thought all American diners were owned by one company called Diner. That was pretty adorable. My grandmother was an impressionable small-town teenager in the UK during World War II and fell in love with her fair share of American GIs as there were hundreds stationed in her hometown. They took her to dances, swept her off her feet, and left her with a hugely romantic view of life in the USA, bolstered over the years by movies. In 2003, my family took her to Florida on holiday and she was devastated that everyone lived normal lives. Ah, that's the nicest thing anyone has ever said about Florida. Thanks! Living in Florida makes me wonder if I'm normal or just less insane than the other residents. I thought Washington was the most serious place in the States, but when I went there for a tour in the White House about 3 years ago, most of the city smelled like green herb. I was very confused. After several replies to my story, I need to clarify I was talking about Washington, D.C. Didn't think it was necessary since I mentioned the White House. I do apologize for any confusion. People think DC equals government, which it does, but they also forget it's an incredibly liberal population. I don't know the numbers now, but it also used to be the gayest city in America by percentage of population, and we know how to party. You get a lot of high-strung young professionals, and they have to blow off steam somehow. People might not believe that DC consistently votes in the 85 to 92% range in favor of the Democratic candidates in each presidential election, regardless of who's currently in office or who the candidates are. I'm not saying that the Dems get 90% more or double the votes than the Republicans. I'm saying that 90% of all votes tallied in the district are in favor of the Democratic candidate. DC is crazy liberal. I got an admit to a school in Texas. I was worried about all the six-shooter slinging cowboys and random shootouts everywhere. 4 years in, and I'm yet to see any of those guys here. I did get to go to a firearms range last year, though. I had an exchange student from Europe recently, and he said his mom said she'd be happy as long as he ended up anywhere in the US except Texas. I live in New Orleans, like in the city. His mom was still happy it wasn't Texas. He said he'd fill her in on the actual danger to him in New Orleans versus Texas when he went home. I visited New York City and had the expectation that everyone would be rushing around and keeping to themselves, but people were so friendly. Like several times a day, girls stopped me in the street simply to say something nice about my hair or outfit. I just found it really strange, but nice. I'm from London, UK, and I guess I'm just used to people avoiding eye contact or talking to strangers. The only downside was the catcalling was heavy and more aggressive than I've experienced anywhere else. I've only been to New York City, LA, Vegas, and Florida, but I've generally always found Americans to be really pleasant and polite. I've had to rethink just how antisocial we are in a lot of Northern European and British cities. Perhaps even if New York is unfriendly by US standards, it's still worlds ahead of Britain in acknowledging people around you. That it was a big country. It's not. It's insanely vast. Stupidly vast. Beyond anything I can compare it to. Returning to the UK after a trip to the US, it feels like I'm visiting Toy Town and everything is just so cute. And I'm English and feel like this after a week or two away. Also, people are a lot less fat than we're led to believe. Yeah, there's some obesity, but no more than I see here in the UK. I also felt massively safer driving in the US than I do in the UK. People seem to drive with a lot more patience and there's a lot less under or overtaking. In the UK, at any given moment, someone is planning to cut you up or is actively swearing at you a car away for being either too fast or too slow, or not pulling away from the red light the instant it turns amber. Yeah, a lot of people underestimate the physical size of the country. It's common in conversations about travel for Americans to point out the ease of traveling in Europe. Americans don't understand how you can hit 2 to 3 countries in a day or for a weekend. Europeans don't understand that you can drive for 8 hours through Texas and still be in Texas. The East Coast with the smaller states are easier to travel through with transit, but once you get west of DC or Maryland, there isn't transit connecting cities. It's plane, car, or if you're severely unlucky, Greyhound bus or rail. My friend's wife is from Costa Rica. She was shocked to find out that Americans take regular showers when she moved here. I guess most of the Americans she was exposed to growing up were the backpack Costa Rica hippie types who didn't clean themselves much. Thought food was going to be crap for some reason, then discovered that the quality was way better than what I'm used to. Also thought everyone was going to be morbidly obese. Came to Colorado, and 90% of people are fit as frick. I thought Walmart was going to suck. I ended up loving Walmart. I also didn't know Colorado was the fittest state before coming to the US. I know now. As someone from somewhere else in America, I just had the same experience on my first trip to the Rockies. Retirees trail running past us up a 45-degree grade at 10,000 feet above sea level. Wow. I thought that WrestleMania was a huge deal for Americans. I was hoping that it would be like a national holiday. WrestleMania and NASA are my two favorite things about America, so this was very sad for me. Vince McMahon would like to have a word with you about an exciting offer that only costs $9.99 a month. Met a guy from Portugal in Portland, Oregon. He said he was surprised that he hasn't seen anyone get shot in the street yet. He assumed everyone in America carried a piece, and street shootings were extremely common. I'm curious, did he think that they were Western-style shootouts, or more like just random acts of violence? Hell, I'm from Idaho and went to New York for Comic-Con, and got asked how I liked the modern tech available in the city. I was confused until we talked more and realized that he thought we didn't have electricity or cars, and that I used a 6-shooter to shoot coyotes trying to get at my cows. It's not just non-Americans. Not really a misconception, but I was pretty young when I moved to the US from mainland Europe. My parents mentioned that the US was at war with Iraq. This was in 2003, and I was wondering to myself why we were moving to a war zone. I thought there would be air raids and bombings all the time. When I was very young, I thought English people lived in castles and rode horses and went to war with bows and arrows. I didn't understand that the movies I saw were portraying historical England, not contemporary England. That's what they actually do. When you travel to England, they'll take you to the special places for tourists, where they maintain the appearance of a modern lifestyle. However, it's all a big conspiracy because they don't let the tourists go to the real places where the English live in castles and ride horses. Their maps are fake, public transport is rigged, every inhabitant of England is sworn to maintain the secrecy of their true lifestyle. That everyone is as good-looking as the people on TV. We are, but that show is Roseanne. To appreciate the quality of this joke, I had to Google image the show Roseanne, and I guess the joke is that most of you basically look like normal people. Zing. Hollywood. I believed it was wall-to-wall famous people, walking on red carpets dressed in golden gowns, and everything was possible if you just walked on that beautiful boulevard. Wrong. Big time. There was nothing, and I mean nothing worse than when we had out-of-town family visit us, fam lives in SoCal, LA area, and begged to be taken to Hollywood so they could see the Walk of Fame, etc. Even after explaining that it's a dump, they always insisted. And then we'd get there and they'd see what we were talking about and we'd have to claw our way out after 30 minutes. That area is horrible in the summer. Traffic going in and out is impossible, everything is overpriced, and it's filthy as heck. I had to work for an event designer out there for a year, and that drive was part of the reason I quit so soon. I love LA and all the cities in it, but Hollywood and Venice Beach can go get screwed. That every shop is like Costco, big in bulk and relatively cheap. That the majority of people in the US are fat, racist, and selfish motherfrickers. I couldn't be more wrong. Everyone was very nice, educated, and kind. Unfortunately, the worst people get the most attention inside and outside the US. Rednecks and hillbillies. I thought that it was a geographical thing and you can only see them in the South. The ones I met up north were pretty hostile at first, but turned out to be awesome people in the end. I thought Americans, especially Californians, are sassy and snobbish. I was so wrong about that. They're freaking chill, friendly, and some are really down to earth. I also thought that most are really rich and that they own mansions with swimming pools at the mountains of Hollywood, but no. Most of them live in apartments and houses. My big misconception was I thought life was easy here, that you don't have to do 2 to 4 jobs just to make a lot of money, but unfortunately it was the other way. When I was in high school, a friend's older sister had a German student and a British student visit for Thanksgiving. They were students with her at UT. It was so much fun talking to them about the US and answering all their questions. The best, though, was their questions on the states. They thought Chicago was a state and were surprised to learn Hawaii and Alaska were states as well. They thought they were a step up from Puerto Rico, but they were surprised to learn they also had representatives and senators. From the outside, the US looked like one country. Once you're there and drive around multiple states, it more seems like many different countries with different accents, laws, regulations, way of life, food. That was a big surprise for me. Misconceptions before moving to America. 1. Americans only work 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. 2. No one works after 12 on Fridays. 3. Americans take a lot of vacations, summer plus Thanksgiving plus Christmas. After moving to America, 1. Everyone is working their butts off. 2. The concept of fixed hours is fuzzy, people log in early and late to get to important stuff at work, and 3. Americans are not getting much time off, most are not even using their vacation days. I was told the typical stuff before going to the US the first time. The TSA are buttholes, everyone carries a piece, and people are hella unfriendly. I saw more pieces in Schiphol in Amsterdam than I did in O'Hare. Seriously, police with MP5s about every 30 feet. Dogs as well. Very weird. Also, O'Hare freaking stinks. Worst airport in the world. Anyway, yeah, I realize mileage may vary with the TSA, but everyone was friendly, interested in my trip in a good way, and helpful. No issues. Spoke to a police officer like an hour later, super friendly and helpful as well. I was starving, he showed me a good place to eat, and had food himself as well. We talked a bit while eating. Cool guy. Everyone was super talkative and friendly in the US. The talkative part is weird, coming from Sweden. I got compliments on my shirt within an hour of leaving the airport after my second in-country flight. That would basically never happen in Sweden. People here dislike social interaction. In the US, it was like free-for-all talking, joking, and complimenting each other. It was nice. As a resident Swede, this is all completely true for those of us who visit the States from here, as I've alluded to in my previous comments. Having strangers talk to you in a friendly manner is genuinely mind-blowing to us who live here. I've lived in the US permanently since 2015, but I've been coming regularly, 3 to 6 month visits, since 2010. As an Englishman, I signed up for the two main stereotypes pre-2010. 1. That all Americans are incredibly obnoxious and loud in public. 2. That everyone in America is a mixture of stupid and fat. Since then, I've evolved my thinking to say the least. 1. They're really not obnoxious, nor are they loud in public. English people are just painfully awkward and shy, hence the crappy handshakes, the lack of eye contact, and the "speak up, you bellend" mumbling of words in public. Trust me, you start to notice this behavior when you've had something to contrast it with. 2. Obviously there are stupid people here, but that is true of any country. It's worth pointing out that I've yet to meet a group of people or a set of individuals as stupid or as cringe-inducing as the people I grew up with in the northwest of England, and I've travelled throughout the south and gone from coast to coast. For instance, I've never once had to explain what a bachelor's degree is in the good old US of A. That was a weekly occurrence after I graduated uni in England. The fat thing is also a bit of a reach too. Americans are typically more health conscious from my experience. I officially became an American a few years ago, but before I first came to the country, I used to believe that American streets would be cleaner than clean and paved with gold. I'm originally from Jamaica. Our streets, back then, were not always as presentable. Then again, it also depends on which area of Jamaica you resided, worked, etc. Anyway, I thought American streets or roads were yellow brick road immaculate. Not sure why I believed that, it wasn't true. They're just as normal as other streets. But I tell you what, it blew my mind when I first saw a street sweeper. That was awesome. I ran into some dude outside of the States that asked me why Americans eat dogs. After maybe not understanding my "what the frick" look for a while, he then asked what hot dogs were. So at the very least I was able to explain, in freedom terms, what God's gift to man is. Hot dogs. What's the worst thing a protagonist ever did in a children's movie or show? Tink in Peter Pan is an absolute monster. She tried to get the Lost Boys to murder Wendy. The whole film is full of aberrant morality. I mean, that's relatively on the low end of her atrocities. She sells out Pan and the Lost Boys to the pirates because of her hatred and jealousy. In the book, it's even worse because the pirates aren't buffoons, but highly competent and malicious. Smee isn't as much of a lovable idiot in the original. He's a sadistic torturer whose sword is called Johnny Corkscrew because he wiggles it in the wound after shanking someone. He's described as a genial man who's not as severe as the other pirates to the kids, but he's also described as one who would stab with no offense. Don't forget Peter Pan was a monster too. He'd teach kids how to fly, but never how to land, and they'd just fly until they starved to death. Lab rats. The dad/inventor kept the kids in cages, and it wasn't until he married and got a stepson that they got rescued. Then everyone was, oh well, good times. Honestly, a lot of Disney shows and other kids' shows have creepy undertones like this. This won't make much sense to anyone who's never watched the show, but I'll never forget an episode of Wizards of Waverly Place where Alex makes a new friend that turns out to be part of this underground uprising against the unfair rules on who gets to have powers. She seemingly joins her, only to find out she was actually tricking her so she could turn her into the authorities. They act like this was a huge, brave, and heroic thing she did, and that the people fighting against unfairness were those evil people who deserved to be punished. Basically, the message was that you should never question authority, and those who try to stand against unjust laws should be turned in. It really creeped me out. Oh, it turns out I misremembered that last part. It's actually worse than that. She freezes her to give her powers to her brother, and then Alex's little brother Max knocks her over and shatters her as the laugh track plays, and they act like it's no big deal. They literally kill her and shrug it off. Man, the people who made that show are messed up, especially making it a kids' show. Princess Poppy in the Trolls movie. The whole problem and everyone nearly dying was all because she couldn't accept and let someone be happy not singing and dancing. I think they handled her better in the second film when Branch outright tells her she's not listening to anyone and making things worse. The Fat Controller in Thomas the Tank Engine bricking up Henry the Green Train. All Henry wanted was a coat of waterproof paint or a break from the work till the rain stopped. Nope, brick up the tunnel and take up the tracks. Frick you, engine, you work for me. Is the Fat Controller really the good guy? The trains are enslaved and taken to the junker's yard if not really useful. Dude is worse than that Grandpa Joe. Ha ha ha, laughed the Fat Controller. You are wrong. There are a lot of downright concerning implications of the Thomas verse. These talking, thinking, feeling creatures are often subjected to downright dangerous work conditions and punished terribly if they voice dissent. That show haunted the young narrator once upon a time. Agent Black from Johnny Test casually and nonchalantly says, "I blew up Malaysia." Also, what I find funny, blowing up Malaysia only gets them down to the level of police officer. Here's my entry to help get conversation going. In the 2005 Disney movie Chicken Little, the school bully, Foxy Loxy, gets teleported by aliens and suffers brain damage resulting in a massive personality change. When the aliens move to return her to normal, Runt of the Litter stops them, saying she was now perfect. It's then implied the two become romantically involved. Let's not forget Buck Cluck being a really crap father to Chicken Little. Frick it, this whole movie just sucks. I don't think it would be remiss to say, frick Buck Cluck. Sportacus and Stephanie treating Robbie Rotten badly, all because he didn't want to be active. Let him live in Lazy Town in peace. Those two came to a place literally called Lazy Town and tried to force everyone to be more active and stuff. If anything, Robbie Rotten should have been the hero for trying to maintain how the town should be. You speak the truth. If you think about it, Robbie Rotten is far more heroic. Sportacus thinks that being active is the key to happiness and well-being. As such, he tries to convince the kids to be more active, which in turn requires him to be active. Okay, sure. Now, Robbie Rotten thinks that the key to happiness and well-being is to be inactive. As such, he tries to convince the kids to be less active, which in turn requires him to be active. Now, this is Robbie making his day worse to improve someone else's day. Ignoring the question of which of them is correct in their worldview, it's obvious that Robbie Rotten is substantially more selfless. The episodes often show Robbie bothered, usually not by the noise the children are making, but by the idea that they are being active. He goes through huge amounts of work and planning to correct this, often making elaborate games for kids in the process. Finally, let's examine the basic claim that Sportacus makes that the children would be happier and healthier if they subscribed to his lifestyle. They do seem to enjoy his sports, though Ziggy often has his complaints. However, compare this to the joy the children had in Robbie Rotten's "You're a Pirate" game, which involved nothing but props, imagination, and singing. Everyone loved it. You might think then that at least Sportacus is correct that the children would be healthier if they followed his advice, but once again I say that Robbie is right. If you trap Sportacus in a cage, he starts to pass out in mere minutes from fruit withdrawal. He might be able to outrun Robbie, sure, but it isn't like Robbie isn't capable enough to build a treehouse, ships, and whatnot. The Cat in the Hat nearly pummeled a young child's skull with a baseball bat. That movie is hilarious and yet so screwed up. He legit cuts his tail off and swears in front of children. In High School Musical, when everyone manipulates Troy into saying he doesn't care about Gabriella at all while recording the whole thing so that she sees it. God, if I was Troy and learned about that, I'd have quit the basketball team. If my friends couldn't stand by me and sold me out like that, there's no reason to be with them. Same with Gabriella and her science friends. Of course, they didn't manipulate her into saying things she'd regret and film it, but they still thought her potentially being distracted from their competition was enough of a reason to mess up her relationship. It's been a while since I've seen it, I'm sorry if I made mistakes. In the Rapunzel TV series, there's a controversial episode in which Rapunzel, after having an argument with Eugene in which she disagrees with his advice, accidentally goes back in time to a point when Eugene was a thieving teen. During this episode, she appears as one of the Stabbington brothers and ends up changing Eugene's views in the future to match hers by the end of the show. Eugene has no idea this has even happened. It's pretty controversial because while Rapunzel didn't mean to do it, she sort of forced a core personality change in him, and the show never really addressed the argument because Eugene is just like, I don't know why we were arguing before because I agree. And the end of the episode. The following story is from a series that I've never seen, nor probably ever will see, but it definitely has some mind-bogglingly interesting implications from the way the author describes it. In the 4th season of Winx Club, the main characters get a new power-up, the Believix, and it's a mess. They each get a new power to use at their own discretion. Here's a quick description of what these powers let them do. 1. The Strength of Life. Bloom. It lets her make people believe in magic and help them overcome their weaknesses. She decides what qualifies as a weakness. She overrides a person's free will to make them believe in magic, which just so happens to make the girls stronger and rewrite their personality if she doesn't like it. Dawn of Light. Stella. It makes her people more cooperative and accepting. Basically, she overrides another person's free will, so they do what she says. Breath of the World. Flora. It lets her make people show more appreciation for nature. Nice on paper, but it basically makes people ignore potentially more important tasks or forego certain technologies in favor of nature. Bright Heart. Musa. This is actually the most normal because aside from the usual of making people believe in magic, its only other effect is to convince people that they can change. Gem of Mind. Techna. To quote the official description of this ability, she can use it to make people think correctly. I think that's enough info. She decides how people should think and magically imposes that way of thinking onto them. The Spirit of Courage. Aisha. This is also very basic, the same as the first one with the added bonus of making people braver. But one use in particular rubbed me the wrong way. In one scene, she made a girl walk through a wall of fire to escape the burning building. The girl with water magic whose best friend is on the way to becoming an insufferable Mary Sue, and whose fire magic can extinguish any flame with a snap of her fingers. There was literally no need to endanger that girl like that. They had 2 people on scene who could not only have saved the building, but also all 6 of them could have repaired it with magic. Overall, those girls are a threat to society. They're emotionally unstable, have 0 coping mechanisms for when they get sad, and are basically demigods. Musa once saw her boyfriend with another woman, and she just ran away crying like a kid. She has sound-based powers. She could have easily listened to what they were saying. I put forth that Santa is a total butthole in Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. I can understand the young reindeer making fun of Rudolph's red nose. Kids are mean and will easily make fun of someone for being different. But then Santa walks in. He could have set everyone straight right there. Explained how it's our differences that make everyone special and all that. Nope, he readily agrees with everyone that Rudolph is a lost cause and even tells Donna he should be ashamed of his son's red nose. Da frick? Until he needs him, then all of a sudden he's part of the group and useful and liked. That's some fit in or go fricking die if I ever saw it. Any deviations from the norm will not be tolerated unless it's exploitable. Ho ho ho! Land Before Time when they're sleeping in the footprint and Sarah tries to wake them up gently and quietly. Littlefoot starts being loud and attracts the sharp tooth, causing him to lose the last gift his mother ever gave him, a tree star. Literally every single decision made by Robin Williams in Mrs. Doubtfire. What's interesting is that as a kid you side with Robin Williams. Rewatching it as an adult, the guy was seriously dysfunctional and his wife was absolutely right to divorce his butt. Also, you realize that Pierce Brosnan's character wasn't the villain you thought he was when you were a kid. He was a legitimately nice, solid guy dating a woman with 3 kids going through a contentious divorce. He was a saint, but ended up almost choking to death. Batman shutting down a machine that was turning Matt Hagen, aka Clayface, back into a human because he was using an experimental thing stolen from his company. I never hated Batman more than that moment because the animated series Clayface is the most tragic fricking creature of a man there ever was. Ron Perlman always made me cry when he had that first moment where he says, "I'm not even a man." I cry every time. In the episode, he's falling apart and dying, then when he's there on the precipice of becoming human again, he can feel it. Batman tosses a batarang and cuts off the flow of the chemical. Fricking hated him for that. Yes, thank you. I hated that episode as a kid. Clayface had the chance to get his life back, but Batman stops it because he stole something? It felt so unfair. Fair to say that The Dark Knight has often done some pretty controversial things in his many iterations, but I'm not sure that anyone can look at his solution and agree it was the morally right thing to do by any means here. Perhaps some of you would disagree. Let me know. Sounds like what happened to Deadshot in that movie. Confronted him when he's out with his child for Christmas shopping, if I recall correctly. Carly from iCarly was a butthead. Remember that episode where she's attracted to the guy because he stole his brother's motorcycle? Then she dumps him because he was not manly enough because he collects plushies. Schneider's humor was so mean-spirited overall. Remember the one where Freddy says he didn't like Fred, and Fred made the whole video about quitting the internet forever, and Freddy was getting hate mail including a phone call from his aunt where she told him she hoped he fricking died? Then at the end they met Fred, and he tells him the whole thing was just made-up drama to bring attention to iCarly and his own channel, and he didn't even bother to fricking tell them first. Pretty much everyone in that show was a crap bag. The third Hokage really had Naruto living by himself. Poor, begging the ramen man to feed him. All this after promising his dying parents that he would take care of him. He was basically the ruler of the village and let the kid live in poverty for no reason. Goku giving Perfect Cell a damn senzu bean right before his emotional teenage son fought him to the death, over the fate of the Earth. A couple of people have said this, can you elaborate? Okay, so Perfect Cell is essentially a combination of all the strongest fighters on Earth. Fighters who have killed planet-destroying monsters, or a being who killed them all in an alternate timeline. Goku, in some sort of bizarre test, fought Cell and won, but didn't kill him, instead he healed him, which brought him to beyond his full strength thanks to alien biology, and made his son fight him for the fate of the planet, just to see if Earth will be okay if Goku dies. This led to his own death, giving his son PTSD, causes the end of the world in the next arc, thanks to Rival becoming evil thanks to a lack of a sparring partner whose power releases an intergalactic demon who destroys Earth. Dragon Ball is weird, I know, and makes both of his sons fatherless for the greater half of their childhood. The parents and parent trap. Let's separate our twins, take one each, and never tell our respective child that she has a sister. What the frick? Mr. Krabs drove his rival Plankton to take his own life by stalking and harassing him in a Pearl costume in the one-course meal episode of SpongeBob SquarePants. What about when SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs actively attempted to cover up what they thought was a murder? Also, didn't Bubble Buddy basically just watch a guy drown? There was some dark crap in SpongeBob. Fun fact, one of the recent SpongeBob episodes legitimately referenced Squidward trying to take his own life. Basically, Squidward and SpongeBob had to deliver a Krabby Patty to a bizarre mind-frickery land. Squidward tried to escape from the place by opening a series of doors until a jump scare of Squidward's face showed up. The UK version removed that part for some reason. Just saw an episode of Teen Titans the other day, and they spent nearly a whole episode trying to escape this witch that had mind-controlled them and was trying to eat them. When they finally trap her back in the cursed pie, it's a weird episode, they leave it outside the door of the teenage supervillain group so that they will get eaten. I can't frame this in any other way than attempted murder. Teen Titans, don't go. Not sure if it counts as a children's movie, but in Man of Steel, Superman grabs one of the Kryptonians and flies him straight into a gas station, causing a huge explosion. The gas station had multiple cars parked at the pumps. In other words, Superman, who later on cries over having to kill the villain intent on destroying his planet, straight up killed at least half a dozen people out of pure negligence and didn't bat an eye. There's a bunch of great videos on YouTube about this, but Superman is portrayed so badly in the DC movies. In the comics, he's such a nice guy. In the movies, he's an emotional robot. He sees an entire building blow up in front of him and just fricks right off. He doesn't even try to help. What the frick? I'm sure The Man of Steel doesn't count as a kids movie as well. I was just desperate to be able to comment on one of the few things that I've actually seen in this collection of stories. Yes, Clark kills a whole bunch of people, and yes, he gives about 1,000th of a frick about it as he does for killing one genocidal Kryptonian general. Hey, remember when in Spider-Man Far From Home, Tony Stark left a high schooler an advanced military drone system with no instructions on how to use it? Like that's a thing that shouldn't exist at all, but much less in the hands of a teenager. Yeah, on the bus in the first hour of the movie, doesn't he accidentally order a hit on one of his classmates? Like, it's kinda weird that in Homecoming, he didn't let Peter have access to most of the stuff in his suit, but then in Far From Home, he's just like, you know what would be a good idea? Letting a teenager have a pair of glasses that could literally order an entire fleet of deadly drones to kill an entire population of people. I mean, at least leave him a manual that he has to read before he has full control over the glasses, surely. As told by Ginger. Fricking Dodie. Rather be popular and wanted than be a good friend to Ginger. I loved As Told by Ginger growing up, and Dodie was the biggest irritant on the show by far. Any little sliver of a chance that she could become popular, she'd drop Ginger and Macy in a heartbeat, only to come crawling back when it blew up in her face. Oh, that one kid, Greg? I don't know, from Diary of a Wimpy Kid. He fricking shuns his best friend for clout, breaks his arm, throws kids in a ditch in the rain, craps on his friend's comic idea, and blames his friend for getting him fired from being a hall monitor. At the beginning of Megamind, when they were just school kids, Metro Man is literally responsible for turning Megamind to villainy by ostracizing and bullying him. It turned out okay in the end, but it's bothersome he never addressed or apologized for his behavior. Willy Wonka literally disfigured 4 kids on his factory tour, not to mention all the slave labor. Butthole pays Oompa Loompas with cocoa beans. That's definitely below the minimum wage. In the first Harry Potter, Dumbledore gets to the end of the year when they count up all the points to see who was the best house. Gryffindor are dead last and Slytherin in first place, like literally 150 points ahead. Dumbledore announces Slytherin is the winner, but then he's like, "Hold up, I've got a couple of announcements for the final tally. Ron is good at chess, 50 points. Hermione is smart, 50 points. Harry is low-key the bravest guy I know, 100 points. Checks calculations, Gryffindor and Slytherin are tied. And Neville was able to have a direct conversation. 5 points. Gryffindor wins! The little girl who lets out all of the dinosaurs at the end of what I think is the second Jurassic World movie. The dinosaurs are about to be gassed to death or something, and they make a moral decision to let them out, since they have a right to live and survive. So the little girl lets them loose, and almost immediately, the dinosaurs are released and kill a bunch of the villains in the movie. We're supposed to cheer, as the audience I guess, that the villains are finally getting their comeuppance, but I mean these dinosaurs aren't sentient or moral like humans. They weren't killing bad people, they were just killing people, and the good guys unleashed human-murdering dinosaurs on the planet. Like, no crap. Within just a few short moments, people died when they let them out of their cages. Harry Potter being left to a known abusive family by a society of wizards has to be high up there. Actually, the whole of Hogwarts is pretty fricked up. They're so irresponsible. They literally teach kids how to basically make Rohypnol. And they sent Harry and his crew into a literal death forest where a powerful unicorn-killing wizard was hiding. Part of why I love/hate Umbridge so much, it's super effective when the lady comes along whose punishments are so fricked up, even by wizard standards. Umbridge is just such a perfect microcosm of petty, official tyranny. We've all met Umbridge in one guise or another, and the hatred people like that stir up in almost everyone is distilled into her character. She's like the platonic form of the parking warden who delights in seeing someone's car towed away. The bureaucrat who barely suppresses a giggle as your dream house has its planning denied. The port official who politely but gleefully informs you that at his say-so you won't be allowed to board the ferry to go on holiday because of a slight paperwork mistake. She's Orwell's proverbial boot stamping on a human face forever. She's the Vogons if someone made a serious take on the concept. She's the personification of the system triumphing over the individual. She's the meat grinder from another brick-in-the-wall video that homogenizes children into a uniform paste. Umbridge absolutely nails that whole archetype, and the fact that she's so memorable is because we've all met her. I dare say Umbridge is Rowling's greatest character, for the sheer hatred she instills in absolutely everyone. The Jedi taking children from their family and encouraging emotional repression. I just started watching Clone Wars recently, having missed it during the actual run. So far, I've seen at least 1 or 2 fake surrenders by the Jedi, and I was like, that's an actual war crime. You can't just do that. I mean, that's just a surefire way to make sure your enemy doesn't accept surrenders anymore and just murders you. Not just emotional repression as well. Many children are taken from distinct species, cultures, and traditions. They indoctrinate them into a cult-like order of mystics, teach them feelings are wrong, familial bonds are wrong, and fraternal bonds are wrong, carnal pleasures and vices are wrong, and suggest that abstinence is important. Preach peace and harmony, and teach them how to use a laser sword and mystic powers to enforce their peaceful ways and the ideals of the Senate. Jingle All the Way is a story about a dad who punches and lies to everyone he meets over the course of a day, only to steal a toy for his kid. As much as I loved the show as a kid and still like it now, I'm a lot older and more cynical. And I can't get over the plain and simple truth that SpongeBob is unforgivably annoying when you really think about it. He's an excellent cook and a good and supportive friend and generally a good soul. But overall? Yeah, I'm quite sympathetic to the living hell Squidward lives in on some days. The older I get, the more I understand Squidward. You either die a SpongeBob or you live long enough to see yourself become a Squidward.
Have you ever correctly had a gut feeling to dislike someone who, on the surface, was a cool person that everybody else liked? What's that story? Content warning. A lot of these are going to involve a lot of inappropriate assault and some underage stuff. So if you're not comfortable with that, probably best to avoid this video. City Council hired another medic. Older dude with long hair, not that that matters. He was new to the scene, recently completing the course. Guy was awesome to hang out with. Went to the bar with the younger EMTs, played video games, etc. At first, I thought he was cool, but as I observed his work, I was his superior and did his probationary eval, I noticed something was off. At the private council meeting, I spoke openly about this in his 30-day review. I stated something was off. He didn't seem like a people person and generally the type that would do this job. They said that I had no grounds to state that he wasn't suited and that he did his job as described. I countered with the fact that when caring for people, being a people person is an unwritten rule, and that doing your job without caring leads to mistakes, and in our job field, a mistake means death. They weren't having it, so I finally said, look, in this job field, you need to learn to read people, and I'm telling you that something isn't right here. City Council told me that basically I was jealous because he got along with the EMTs. Honestly, I could care less. I'm not in this job for them. Fast forward a month and I get a call from an ER about an hour from us. They said that their report said the patient was administered 80 milligrams of drug X. The patient denied receiving it, and since they couldn't figure out why the heck the medic would have even given it, they ran a tox panel on him which showed that he did not receive it. The doc told me normally he'd let it slide as an error and asked me to speak to him about accuracy, but he felt something was off. I thanked him and after hanging up, pulled the trip sheets. Right in the run report, it has the drug, the amount given, and the time. I pulled up the narcotics log. It showed drug given and replenished along with the tag numbers. Next, I called a friend of mine who was a local cop and was off duty at the time. He came over and I opened the other medic's narc box. Sure enough, it had been opened and replaced. We then went through his logs for the past 2 months he had been working and located at least 12 times drugs had been given when probably not needed. I called the ER doc back and explained to him, and his exact quote, "Here's my personal phone number and our lawyer's number. I'll fax you over a written statement along with the test results. I'll see if we have anything on other patients he brought in." My buddy then called dispatch to tell the council members there was an emergency at the station and they need to come in. When they got there, we showed them all the evidence and what we suspected. Within 15 minutes, we not only had the DA approval, but also a judge sign an arrest warrant. Turns out the dude admitted to having a 20-year painkiller addiction. He ran out of sources, so he figured being a medic would give him easy access. He even told the judge he was worried that he would have killed someone just for the meds. At the trial, I was asked for what resolution I wanted. I told the judge, being a paramedic, I've seen how drugs change a person and that I don't hold him fully responsible. On my recommendation, he got 3 months in a locked drug rehab facility, followed by 6 months of house arrest. 4 years later, the dude is clean and runs a fundraiser to help raise money for the END to provide anonymous Narcan services and drug awareness programs. Today, this guy will be an honored member of my crew. Addiction literally changes people. The end result is I now am solely responsible for hiring the medics, reviewing, and dismissal. I no longer need to justify to counsel why someone was dismissed. This job is one where a gut feeling decides someone's fate. Sometimes our gut instincts are only sort of right. When I was in 7th grade, there was this girl who was really quiet and sort of creepy, and she smelled like crap, literally. She wore these odd dresses that looked like pioneer dresses, homemade, and she was just, well, creepy. No one talked to her. People tried to avoid sitting next to her. We all gossiped about her as being the epitome of creepiness. Then one day, she was gone. Didn't come to class. The next day, it was all over the news. The police had arrested these horrifically abusive parents who were neglecting and abusing their daughter and who had kept their younger son locked in a cage his entire life and never fed him. The younger boy was kept alive by, you guessed it, his older sister. The police were led to the house by neighbors' complaints about the stench. So this poor, smelly girl was suffering abuse from her parents and all the while sneaking food and water to her little brother, who was literally locked in a cage for years upon years, keeping him alive, and then coming to school where she would be avoided and mocked behind her back and sometimes humiliated. She was a weirdo, and our guts all told us there was something wrong there. but she was a freaking hero. Never heard what happened to her after the parents were arrested. Hope she recovered. I never trusted my ex-BF's uncle. I just knew he was trouble and had issues with him visiting or my ex visiting him. He was arrested in Florida last year for production and selling meth and hosting a prostitution ring out of his home. Later learned the ex partook in all the activities at his uncle's home. Apparently my gut was right about the uncle, but not about my ex. My snake did. I had the sweetest, chillest ball python who never nipped or hissed or reared up or anything. She'd just curl up with you and hang out. One day, a friend brought over some of his friends, and all of a sudden, my snake went nuts, standing straight up in her tank and hissing at one of the guys. A couple of weeks later, that dude robbed my house while I was out of town. R.I.P. Guinevere, a good snake. Interviewing a guy for a job. Something doesn't feel right, but my interviewing partner really seemed to like him. We get to his portfolio of work, and I see my side project that I worked on alone as one of his websites. So I start asking him questions about it, what challenges he had, how the client was, etc. I let him go on and on. Then I say, I have to level with you. This is my work. You are showing me my own work. Look at the source near the footer. It has my website in the comments. He went ghost white, and I just sat there. After that, I coached him a little on how not to suck, and he left. We called the contract agency that sent him and let them know. My sister's first husband. I was 5 when they got married, and I only actually met him a few times in person because they lived on the other side of the country. My family really loved him. He was charming, athletic, smart, handsome, financially secure, and seemed like a great dad when they had kids. Plus, he was never anything but nice to me. But I always sensed something shady about the guy. When I was in the 5th grade, I remember getting in huge trouble for a class assignment, an essay describing our families, in which I described him as a bad person, pretty much word for word, quote, "There's something I just don't like about him." It was one of the only times I got spanked as a child. Well, fast forward a couple years, and my parents discovered that he'd been abusive to my sister and the kids almost the whole time. They ended up divorcing, and he has proven to be a complete sociopath ever since. He hadn't paid a dime in child support, despite being well off enough to buy a new luxury sports car every few years, and uses their 2 kids, who are now teenagers who know he's full of crap, to play mind games with my sister, bringing her to court for full custody, knowing he won't win due to his past, just to cause her inconvenience and rack up legal fees for her, just as an example. He also has refused to let the kids fly out to visit our side of the family a few times for no reason whatsoever. He's a jerkwad, a narcissist, a complete sociopath, and somehow, 10-year-old me was able to sense it before anyone else in the family. My mom brought her new boyfriend over the house one time for me to meet him. He weirded me out. I can't tell you why, but I didn't like him. Maybe it's because he was a 35-year-old man who wore visors. Friendly and funny guy who my family liked. A year into their relationship, he beat the crap out of my mom and stole her dog. Probably the closest I've come to an assassination attempt. Edit 1. I didn't go after him as not to implicate my mom. Also, we got our dog back. Edit 2. Yep, he's in jail. My childhood best friend's mother's boyfriend. He creeped me out and I hated being over at her house when he was there. Her family went on a ski trip with mine, and my parents both thought he was great, funny, charming, etc. They didn't understand why I didn't like him. Years later, my best friend told me that he inappropriately abused her starting when she was about 9. I probably was picking up on her fear of him. So my husband has this cousin, Jason, and he loathes them, always has since he was a small child. There are stories about my husband trying to beat Jason when he was 5. It was so bad that as an adult, my husband refused to attend any family gatherings that Jason would be, out of the fear that he would beat the living crap out of him. Nobody could ever figure out why my husband hated his cousin so much. He had never done anything to him. And my husband is the most laid-back and friendly person I've ever met. He genuinely likes everyone, except for this guy. I never understood it myself, never having met Jason. And anytime I would ask my husband about it, he would always say, "I freaking hate that kid. He's not right." Jason was pretty well liked throughout the family, so my husband's position caused him to catch a lot of crap from other family members. I finally got to meet Jason a few years ago at my brother-in-law's wedding, and I saw right off what my husband was talking about. To the casual observer, there was nothing tangible that Jason did that he could put your finger on, but something was off. He would laugh and smile, but the smile didn't go all the way to his eyes. His eyes were just flat and empty. unless he was looking at the girls at the wedding. And when I say girls, I mean children under 10. When he looked at those girls, his eyes lit up with this sick little light. You know how someone who hasn't eaten in a long time looks when they finally get a meal they love set in front of them? That's how Jason's eyes looked when he looked at those little girls, like he was hungry and they were his meal. About 2 years ago, Jason's dad married a woman with 2 young daughters. Jason went off and volunteered to babysit. About a year ago, Jason was arrested and convicted of forcing himself on both of those little girls multiple times. Screw you, Jason. I wish my husband had beat you, you creepy son of a gun. When I played high school football, we had an equipment manager who had been doing the job for decades and was absolutely adored by the community. Guy was in his 70s or 80s. One day, I'm ready for a game early, so I head out to the bus that's taking us. I see him loading stuff up, so I offer to help him load a few things. Once we're all loaded on the bus, he walks to me in the back, because I was a cool kid, and hands me a Hostess cupcake in front of everyone as a thank you. He handed me the cupcake, looked me in the eye, and this sense of dread just falls on me. I have no idea why, and everyone's looking at me, so I act normal. I eat the cupcake, because I was, and still am, fat and will eat any cupcake you hand me, and just kind of write off the feeling. That summer, he was arrested for inappropriately assaulting some 15-year-old girl. I'm pretty sure they thought he did more, but couldn't prove it or something. While in the Army, we moved into a new house in upstate New York. We were being neighborly and talked to a guy across the street. He had 5 kids, no wife. He also had multiple neighborhood kids playing in the yard. He told us we can always send ours over. He gave us both this horrible feeling, so we smiled and got out. About a year later, my wife told me, I was in Kandahar, that his kids were taken from him. He had been touching them at least ever since his wife died. About 15 years ago, I worked in a small office, mostly men, all who I really liked. A new guy started one day, and instantly I had a bad feeling about him. I don't even know exactly why I felt that way, and all the other people seemed fine with him, so I did my best to be polite and find things to talk to him about. I was in my mid-30s. He was about the same or a little older, and we both had young sons, so I was able to find some common ground. Apparently he and his wife didn't live together. She might have been back in his home country, but I could never shake that bad feeling. A year or so later, I had left the company to have my second son, and a friend who had taken my place there called me one morning and said, "Did you read the paper today?" That man had been arrested in another state, apparently having been set up by an FBI sting online, where he had been chatting with who he thought was a 13-year-old girl and was meeting up with her. In the trunk of his car, they found a video camera and rope. I worked as a CNA in a nursing home during/right after high school. We got a new guy that made a lot of mistakes and obviously had some cognitive impairments. I'm not sure what was wrong exactly, but it was obvious that he was mentally slow. Leaving a patient with the feeding tube laying flat, increasing their chance of aspirating food into their lungs, for example. On several occasions, I complained about him to our supervisor and also vented to my coworkers that I just did not feel right about him. Everyone accused me of not having any compassion. They said he was slow, but that he would get it and I should be more understanding. They all thought that I was being judgmental because of his disability, but it felt like more than that to me. One night, another CNA went to answer a call light and walked in on him forcing himself on an elderly bedridden woman. He didn't even stop, just held eye contact with the coworker until he was finished. This all happened over 15 years ago. He went to jail obviously, but I saw him in Walmart last summer, so he is out now. I sure hope he is never able to work in a position to take advantage of vulnerable people ever again. Yes, but I suppressed it so quickly and fast because I felt like it was horribly ungracious since she was being so friendly. Over the next couple years, she became my closest friend in the new town I had moved to. Then the following couple years, it vacillated between being close but just feeling like she really didn't want me around or was messing with me a little bit. Turns out she was having an affair with my husband and was literally intentionally driving me crazy. There was a man that would walk around my neighborhood with samurai swords on his back. He also had a golden retriever that would follow him everywhere. As children, we were always intrigued by the swords and obviously wanted to pet his dog as well. He would never let us and yelled at us if we got too close. I'm at Chevron getting some gas and 20 cop cars surround a man by the dumpster. Turns out, this guy had just killed a woman in the woods of North Carolina, chopped her into pieces, presumably with the samurai swords, and was dumping the bloody clothes in said dumpster. His name was Gary Michael Hilton, and he's presumed to be the killer involved with numerous other backwoods murders throughout the Southeast. This one's going to be a long story, and is going to involve a lot of non-consensual content, but it will be the last story. My stepfather. He's my mom's third husband. Mom met him at a bar, a country bar she used to go dancing at, and saw him there for a while before deciding to introduce him to her kids. He took us all out to dinner that night, and we had a relatively good time. Then we all went back to the house. We weren't home long before I heard him and my mom giggling in the hallway, and suddenly I just felt sick. I was about 12 at the time, by the way. I'm not sure what it was, but suddenly I just hated this guy. My mom asked what was wrong, and I just said I didn't feel good and went to my room. Imagine the surprise of all of us kids when we woke up to see that this guy was still there. He moved in that very night. I tried to make the best of a bad situation, though I avoided him for some time. No more than a week later, he offers to brush my hair for me. We're all in the living room watching TV. I'm hesitant at first, but my mom encourages me. Apparently he had sisters and knew how to brush girls' hair. I kept my hair about waist length back then, and it was a pain to get the knots out, so I caved and let him brush my hair. He just brushed it, no big deal. So when he offered other times, I let him. Then one day, he offered while no one was there. Because my hair was so long, why don't I sit up on the edge of the chair in front of him? Oh, hey, would you like a back rub? I rub your mom's back all the time. I should mention this wasn't my first interaction with a perv, and I actually was very bothered just by being that close to someone. I hated being touched back then, but because everyone obviously liked this guy, I told myself I shouldn't cause any problems. Next thing I know, he says, "Can I rub down a little further? In front? It's your decision. You're completely in charge here." Thank God I had the courage to say no. I avoided him for ages after that and didn't have the sense to tell my mom or my brothers. This guy proceeds to find ways to get both of my older brothers out of the house by the time I'm 15. He goes long periods of time, seeming to be a perfectly good guy, and then out of nowhere hits me with something pervy and horrid. Sophomore year comes up and we get our class rings. Well, these rings are not cheap, and we've always been fairly poor. My mom says I have to ask Jerk, name changed, not so obviously, for the money. I ask him to buy my class ring, and he says, "What's in it for me?" I go silent. My mom is right there. She innocently says, "She can bake you a cake." I'm good at baking. He's quiet for a while and has to think it through. Then he says, "Okay, but there are rules." I forget what all the rules were, stupid stuff mostly. But his final rule was, if you lose this ring, you get naked. What? This is an expensive ring. It's a lot of money, so you better not lose it or you get naked for me. My mom tells him to stop, but only half-heartedly. When I try to talk to her about it later, she says, "Well, I guess you better not lose it." At that point, I kind of figured I couldn't count on my mom for help. Over the years, I've learned she was messed with a lot when she was younger and has convinced herself that all men are this way. I love my mom to death, but it kills me that she believes this. He's never stopped being a total jerk. I lived with them until I was 20. I was very shy, and having a job was very hard for me. I tried moving in with my oldest brother to help him take care of his kid, but after 3 months I was asking to come home and once again got the "what's in it for me" response. I got to hear all about how he'd lived the past few years just for me and mom, bought us a house and everything, and how ungrateful I was. I came back to what was essentially a prison. I had my nephew with me at first, as my brother was going to give my mom custody of him. That is, until my stepdad got mad at him and kicked him hard. A 3-year-old little boy who hadn't done anything more than annoy him, probably by making noise. So mom calls up my brother and tells him to come get him because she's afraid to have him around my stepfather. Then, once he's gone, she convinces herself that he never did that. Finally, I met my first boyfriend. By this time, I'm 20. I had gotten 2 part-time jobs and he worked at one of them. I was hanging out at his house a lot and my stepdad got jealous. He decided to give me a curfew of midnight and said if I break it, then I'm out of the house and can't ever come back unless I sleep with him because he knows I can't be a virgin anymore. I was, so there was no excuse now. I cried to my boyfriend, and he told me I could come live with him. This was after we'd only been seeing each other for about 3 weeks. That night, I didn't go home. My stepfather called me and screamed, called me stupid, and I screamed back and told him how he'd made my life a living hell. An hour later, he and mom pull up with his truck full of all my stuff that he could put in it. He took my car because it was mom's and dumped my stuff right there, telling my boyfriend I was his problem now. I will never forget the smirk on my mom's face when she hugged me and I apologized for everything. She said she wasn't mad at me at all, but was proud. Apparently, I'd had the guts to do what she couldn't. Of course, not long after I left, he finally proposed to her and they got married. It's screwed up to realize that the reason your stepfather didn't marry your mom is because he wanted a shot at you first. Anyway, this is way longer than I meant it to be, but the point is that everyone who meets this jerk loves him. They don't know who he is, just that he's personable and relatively smart. But I never forget that first night when for no apparent reason, I just felt sick at the thought of him. Edit. There was an update post somewhere in the comments. It was too long for me to post here, so I just did it as a reply. The TLDR is, no, I'm not with that boyfriend anymore, but we were together 7 years. Yes, Mom is still with this jerk, but I never see him. She's afraid to leave him, but now that it's just the two of them, she sees it as her being the only one who has to tolerate his crap, and she's willing to do that for what she sees as financial security. She visits by herself, and no one questions why we don't go visiting there.
What is a time your pet has genuinely surprised you? My cat once pounced on a poisonous snake that was moving towards my son. He pinned it down until one of us got to him and then let the snake go. Kitty got some extra nice tuna fish that night. As some people have commented, snakes are venomous, not poisonous. Whatever. Gary doesn't care, he just saw something he could pounce on. I was doing some electrical work in an empty 2-story industrial building. I brought my dog along because she likes running around, exploring and chasing mice. Every so often she'd take a break and come visit me working. I only had one electrical part left, a nut-like wire tensioner, and I showed it to my dog randomly and said, "Go get it." The pile of these parts was downstairs in a 20 to 30 room building on a pile of gear. My dog, who is crappy at even playing fetch, shows up 5 minutes later having identified the part I asked her for and bought me a new one. Now, at dinner parties, I always try to find 2 of the same objects and hide them somewhere in the house, and she always amazes guests by showing up with what I asked her. I've hired people who I send for a wrench and 2 hours later they return with pliers. Does your dog have a criminal record? And if not, does he have an updated resume? My favorite cat, now passed, had many strange habits. He played with water in the sink, jumped in the shower when you were taking too long, jumped and left paw prints on the top of our walls, etc. But the one time he truly surprised me was nearly 16 years ago. I walked into my bedroom and found my wife crying and holding the cat. I asked her what was wrong and she started to explain. I was tired and decided to take a nap. Butterscotch jumped up, curled up with me and then started kneading my stomach. I didn't understand what she was getting at and told her so. She said that the last time he did that was when she was pregnant with our first daughter 5 years earlier, and he never did it since. She was convinced that he was trying to tell her that she was pregnant again, and she was crying because she was so happy. She had even made an appointment to get a pregnancy check. Turns out, 4 weeks pregnant. I missed that cat. He made it to over 20 years. Cats, man. They can be really nasty little mean buttholes, but there are several in this collection of stories that exemplify what the best of them can be like. Related, the whole recording session is making me want to go and buy a whole bunch of pets. I posted this story a few months ago, but it's pretty typical of the interactions between my dog, a Corgi Sheltie mix, and me. After 8 years of things like this, there's very little that surprises me with him. A while back, I was playing fetch with him out at the lake. He was starting to get bored, so after getting the ball one time, he carried it with him behind a tree, dropped it, and then trotted back to me as if there had been no ball in the first place. I wanted to see what he'd do next, so I got the ball and threw it again. This time, he ran and got it, then proceeded to jump in the lake, swim out 20 to 30 feet, drop the ball in the water, and swim back. Needless to say, this ended our game of fetch. We had a Jack Russell who would just play reverse fetch. My daughter had really proudly just taught him to fetch when he took the ball, trotted over to the patio railing, we live on the 3rd floor apartment, and dropped it over the side. I went down to go get it, gave it back to him, and he went right back out and dropped it over the edge again. I live next to a mental health facility. I never really bought the idea that dogs could sense things in people, but when I got my Weimaraner and took him for walks around the hospital grounds, he would act completely different when someone with a mental illness approached us versus a staff member. Even if they were 100 feet away, he would stop playing and stand by my side if they were a patient. Weird. I had severe depression problems as a teen, and some days I wouldn't get out of bed. My lab at the time would come up, stick his nose under my arm, flip it up so it lands on him, or would bring his toy and drop it into my lap. The dog knew when I wasn't doing well, and did everything he could to make me active. We used to have a kitty that would go to work with my dad. He worked in a grain terminal where farmers would bring in their grain and they would put it onto train cars and send it out to wherever. mills, etc. While Dad was working, the kitty would be running around the place chasing mice or playing with the farmers when they came in. The phone rang off the hook around there. Almost every few minutes the phone would ring and someone would answer it. If the secretary was out, one of the other guys would have to come in and answer it. I was just a young lad back then, but one day the phone was ringing and nobody was coming to answer it. The cat jumps onto the desk, flips the receiver off the base station so it's upside down, speaker and mic facing up, and starts meowing into it. I swear the farmer must have been confused as heck. When I asked my dad about it, he said that the kitty will let it ring 4 times before she hops up and answers it. I was blown away. Was a damn good kitty. I had a male cat named Stinky. In all the time I had him, approximately 5 years, he had never slept in the bed with my wife and me. I go on a business trip once, and the first day I'm gone, my wife is laying in bed reading, and Stinky actually jumps on the bed with her, and this is crucial, in the spot where I usually sleep. My wife is surprised, but keeps on reading. Stinky proceeds to roll onto his back and extend his wiener, making sure that the wife sees it. In conclusion, my cat waited for me to go out into town and try to seduce my wife. I think he owes you a dead bird for that one. Hamsters. Mum had a litter, and after they went from little pinkies to little fuzzies, they would take turns in the wheel, 2 to 3 side by side, getting up speed, while the others would line up outside, and one by one grab onto the rim of the wheel, get lifted up and let go, to get flung to the other side of the cage, then get back in line. They also traded up runners from time to time. Some hamster democratic process. There's an analogy for America somewhere in here. Hamsters are funny little weirdos as is, and the prospect of a flying hamster circus only makes them seem cuter. Bless. We have a cat that never played with toys. She would watch the other cats play and sometimes try to do it herself, but couldn't wrap her mind around bat the ball and chase it. She was pretty dumb in general. If you put a clear glass on the floor with milk in it, she would swat at the sides while the other cats would reach their paws in the top and get the milk. So I got a laser pointer and was playing with the other cats. After a while, the dumb cat showed up and I thought that maybe she would have fun with the red dot since she didn't understand other toys. I zipped the dot around the floor. She looked at it, followed it with her eyes, then walked to my feet, reached up and put her paw over the end of the pointer, blocking the laser. I have no idea if she understood or if it was a coincidence, but it really surprised me. You have a cat nerd. Doesn't really get sports or bars, but great with high-energy physics problems. Maybe your cat was just really smart instead of really dumb. Sees ball, doesn't understand why hitting a ball over and over is fun. Sees laser dot, goes to source and stops it. Sees milk glass, tries to spill it over rather than drink it little by little. Mr. Energy Flow might be onto something here. Oh, my cat does the same thing. He'll first put his head in the glass, and if he can't get any water, he'll just knock it over. A glass is his first priority. He will skip his full bowl, walk right by it, to get on the computer desk and drink my near-empty water glass. After the 3rd keyboard got destroyed, I replaced his bowl with a glass. Apparently that's all he wanted. One of my cats kept meowing. I checked her food bowl, water bowl, litter box, and general health, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. I gave her plenty of attention and playtime and went back to working on some homework. She continued meowing. Finally, I threw my arms up and to the side in frustration and said, "What do you want?" She looked me dead in the eye, raised her paws in the exact same exasperated way I had my arms raised. She was literally standing upright on 2 legs, holding out her paws like I had my arms, and made her best attempt to copy my speech by saying, "Meow," before scuttling away. I was speechless and stunned for a good minute and relatively freaked out. I'd never had a cat mimic my behavior before. She's never done it again, despite my attempts to encourage it. My cat Dusty has a small cat door to go outside in the summer. Ducks regularly come into my yard and I feed them bread sometimes. Well, Dusty one night grabs the loaf of bread off the counter, takes it out of the cat door, then hides the bread in the bushes. He takes a piece of bread and puts it in an open area and waits in nearby bushes. He was trying to bait ducks with bread. Frickin' genius cat. I had to leave my dog alone for a couple of hours in the morning and the night before he had eaten something that didn't quite agree with his stomach. When I came back, he didn't greet me like he usually does, so I was suspicious. He couldn't get out of the house to poop, so he had to poop in the middle of the living room. I didn't yell at him, no point now, plus he knew it was wrong and he just couldn't hold it in. He hasn't done this since he was a pup 3 years ago. Well, I go to investigate and see that there's been a disturbance in the bathroom. The rug in front of the toilet was all thrown around and the toilet seat had scratches on it. I think my dog, after the many times he had seen me poop with the door open, decided that he needed to go there but didn't know how to use it, so he scratched the seat while trying and threw the rug around in anger of not being able to do it. Then he pooped on the carpet as a last resort. I had a lovable golden retriever whose name was Duncan. Like many dogs, he had a supreme sense of emotions of my family members, comforting us when we were sad, jumping around with us when we were excited. He really sensed how we felt and adapted to the situation, but lots of dogs do that, so that's not the surprising part. He had a sensitive stomach and often threw up despite our best efforts to feed him carefully and beneficially. My mom never scolded him for throwing up in the house, but he still felt extremely guilty whenever it happened. One day, he slowly came up next to me as I was doing homework. Glancing at him, I saw he had his mouth jammed shut and refused to open it for me. When I got out of my chair, he politely led me to the back door, signaling that he had to go outside. I quickly let him out, and after walking all the way across our deck and down the steps into the grass, he let loose the largest amount of vomit I've ever seen. He spent a solid 30 seconds emptying the contents of his stomach into a neat pile on our yard. Conclusion: after patiently storing vomit in his mouth for at least a full minute, my faithful dog politely led me outside, across our deck and into our yard, where he emptied all of his stomach contents in a neat pile so that my mom wouldn't have to clean up after him. It's been said many times by many people, but we don't deserve doggos. No other animal will put themselves through that amount of discomfort just to make us happy. When I was a kid, I had a cat that was a little odd. One day, my mother caught two teenage boys tormenting my cat along an alley that went along outside our house. She thought they were trying to cut the cat's tail off with a craft knife, so ran and kicked one of the boys away. My cat went to run off, but when it saw that the boy with the knife had turned on my mother, it went nuts, launched itself at the boy's face, and tore it to bits in a frenzy. Never heard of cats doing that kind of thing. I got my cat in college. He was very young when I got him, and I was pretty much the only human he interacted with, so he was very attached to me. He loved to snuggle and purr and was never a biter. Anyway, I happened to have an eating disorder at the time, and I would weigh myself several times a day. The weight would not be what I wanted, and I would get upset. After a few weeks of having the cat, I went to go step on the scale. As I tried to step on it, the cat launched himself across the bed, tackled my calf, and bit down very hard. He never did things like that. After that episode, he proceeded to bite and scratch me whenever I went for the scale. Apparently, his cat logic was, human girl steps on box, gets sad, and cries. I must make sure she never steps on the box. Funny thing is, this actually helped me get treatment for the problem. I was like, crap, even my cat knows I have a big problem here. I should get help. Anyway, today I'm happy and healthy, thanks to the best cat ever. 6 years ago, one of our two cats died, and my sister insisted that we cremate it and keep it in an urn. As soon as they'd placed the urn into a cabinet we had at home, our other cat sat in front of it making meowing noises that I'd never heard coming from a cat before, for like 20 minutes. I couldn't believe that our cat knew it was her sister and mourned like any other human. It was quite astonishing, really. When I was in high school, my family and I went to the feed store to get some supplies for our lawn and gardens. While there, we saw a brown bunny that someone had dropped off to sell. I begged and begged my dad for this rabbit. He said no. I came home a day or two later, and there is the rabbit sitting in its cage on our coffee table. Apparently my dad broke down and bought him. He was a great rabbit and very unusual in the fact that he thought he was a dog, always running around your feet when you came home. He would sit on the couch with my dad and eat ginger snaps and drink coffee with him. He always knew when you were sick. On the couch, he would jump up and just rest on your chest. We had him for 10 years and he died this past spring. My dad trained guard dogs in Vietnam and I have never seen him cry, not even at his own mother's funeral. But I'll be damned if that rabbit didn't affect my dad in such a way that he cried and said he lost a best friend. I was laying on my couch and wanted to turn the light off, but the switch was on the other side of the room. Within 10 seconds of me thinking that I wanted the light off, I crap you not, my cat comes flying out of nowhere, jumps and flicks the switch off. It was the craziest freaking thing, and to this day I wish someone had witnessed that with me. It was amazing. My cat is amazing. You know how outdoor cats will sometimes bring you presents like dead birds and mice? Well, our outdoor kitty brought us a ham and cheese sandwich. I have no idea where he found it. We had a golden retriever that thrived on escaping. Whenever the door was even a bit ajar, he'd take off and have day-long excursions, only to come back hours later with a huge grin on his face, and usually filthy from adventuring in the surrounding creeks and woodlands. If you ran after him, he'd troll the crap out of you and play chase games for up to an hour before letting you put the leash back on. If you happened to find him while you were driving, he'd readily jump in the car with you, no hassle. One morning as my parents were getting ready for work, the dog bolted. They both had meetings to get to and would only be gone for a few hours, and we knew he'd be back in the afternoon, so they left. When we came back, we circled the neighborhood looking for him and found him taking center point in the street with a pack of 5 other neighborhood dogs traipsing after him. Fricker had formed a gang and he was the gosh darned alpha. We pull up and scream for him to get in the car, which he readily does with a huge grin on his face as he slobbers and licks everyone. Business clothes be damned. Then we take the long way around the neighborhood to get back to our house. By the time we do, all 5 of the dogs we just saw with him were waiting for him obediently in our driveway. We shooed them away. Later we found out from the neighbors that our dog had run from yard to yard and freed the fenced-in dogs by nosing up the latches. Once this started, other neighbors had been warning each other of the mass exodus by telephone, but our dog was too fast. People then had to replace the latches with locks since our dog had taught the others how to jailbreak. The Great Dog Escape may go down as one of my favorite stories in this thread, and the fact that his liberated brethren gathered outside his house to protest his imprisonment is the cherry on the cake. I had a house rabbit named Ceres that my parents rescued. She was going to be put down because her owners got evicted. She loved reggae and bassy music, and she used to lie still and purr along to it. She lived in my room for 6 months, and whenever I came home from school, she'd jump up and sit on my feet. She used to have these little wild fits and run around and do cartwheels. Then she died when my family was away on holiday, and the kennel kept her in the freezer. I have a big fat cat named Pete. The day my son came home from hospital, Pete decided that he was in charge of the baby. He would lay with him for hours, and as soon as the baby would start to stir, Pete would immediately come and find us. Pete would soothe, clean, and be the best babysitter in the world. 5 years later, our cat still follows my son everywhere he goes. One more about Pete. My husband deployed for 15 months. The second he walked in the door, Pete ran like a gosh darn tiger and jumped straight for him. He refused to leave my hubby's lap for the next 8 hours. In conclusion, my cat likes boys more than girls. I'd been overly affectionate with my guinea pig for months, but he bitterly ignored me. Recently, I decided to ignore him, seeing as my loving nature doesn't agree with him. Now the little butthole won't leave me alone, licks my face, my toes, popcorning, weird jump thing guinea pigs do when they're ecstatic, for joy when he sees me. God, he is such a butthole. Oh man, when my rats popcorn, it is so cute. It happens when they're playing, or if I give them something really tasty, like if I hand them a piece of chocolate. They cautiously take it with their mouth, then adjust the position of the food in their mouth to carry it easier, then bounce under the furniture to go and eat it. Their eyes get wider when they eat something tasty like, om nom nom, oh wait, oh god, oh this is delicious. And they will also play a game with me, where they hop up on my back and walk around my hands and knees and stop by different furniture in the room. They will then hop off me onto the bed, desk, or whatever, sniff around, and then hop back on my shoulder to go somewhere else. This repeats several times before they get bored. My dog is always the star at the dog beaches. He will literally get every dog there playing in one big group. The other people now know him as the party starter. One day, there was this really old, giant wolfhound of some kind, just a generally huge, shaggy dog, Mutt. My dog runs over and the owner warned me that her dog was really old and grumpy, so I tried to keep my little party animal away from the big dog. Well, my dog won't give up and keeps going over and trying to wrestle with this gigantic old dog, and eventually the old guy breaks down and started playing with my dog. I'm all laughing because this huge dog is literally putting my whole tiny dog in his mouth, and they're generally just wrestling away and having the best time, and I look up and the other dog's owner is crying. "What's wrong?" I ask. "My dog has cancer and is getting put down shortly, and this is the happiest I've seen her in months." While all the other dogs were staying away from the big grump, my dog just rolls up to give this old-timer one last tussle in the sand. It was truthfully one of the most amazing moments I've ever been a part of. It's something so simple, but I went outside with my girlfriend and saw one of my cats across the street that was excited to see us. He decided to make his way over to us, and since we lived on a big and busy street, I nervously watched as he approached the curb, but to my amazement, he turned his head to the left, then checked to his right, and happily pranced across the street. That little butthole just looked both ways before crossing. It was small, but it surprised me. My yellow lab would get offended at you if you talked crap about him or scolded him unjustly. Then you had to apologize to him to get him to quit sulking. As in, you actually had to go up to him and say, "I'm sorry, Tucker," and pet him, or he would refuse to look at you. My dad would never apologize to the dog, so the dog would stay mad at him for days. It was hilarious. Once when I was a kid, I was sitting on my bed reading a book. My cat was in the room and I had the door closed. The cat decided she wanted to get out of the room and started standing by the door and meowing to get my attention. I wanted to finish the chapter of the book off, so I just ignored her. She decided that wasn't good enough, so she jumped on the dresser right next to the door and immediately pushed a cup full of spare change off the dresser. She then stood stock still and stared at me. When I didn't get up and let her out, she pushed my watch off the dresser and stared at me again. She was basically saying to me, "I know this bothers you, and I'm going to keep knocking your crap on the ground until you open the door." My dog ejected a Celine Dion CD from the player whenever the fourth track came on. For the life of me, I can't remember the song, but when we discovered this, we had to see if it was an accident. For science! And by the third try, she gave us this look like we were torturing her. And it was Celine, so probably. My first dog was a psychotic Jack Russell by the name of Foxy. Foxy hated being indoors and would rather drag his bed to our garden to sit in the lawn, surrounded by 6-foot fences. One day, a cat wandered along the top of the fence and the dog saw it. God only knows how, but he jumped to the top of the fence and headbutted the cat off it. That dog was a nutter.
Reddit, what did your parents teach you that you had to unlearn? Well, my grandpa told me that soda evaporates quickly, as in half the can in 20 minutes, when I was around 6. Took me like 10 years to realize he's been drinking my soda when my back is turned. I always drank my soda fast when outside or in hot places because of it. Wanting anything is selfish. Learning to undo this train of thought is the greatest feat of my life. It's still hard for me to attempt for first place in any form of competition. I always feel that someone else is more deserving, so I don't give it my all. If I do win, I'm always certain it was a fluke. This applies to my relationships in the worst way, too. I have a hard time dating because I'm convinced that if I date them, I would be taking them off the market and someone more deserving would be losing out. Or how I have a strong desire to be dominant in the bedroom, but I'm constantly guilting myself for wanting these things, so I either submit or beat around the bush. It doesn't matter what I want. I am undeserving, and to achieve is selfish and wrong. Screw that thought process. My mother told me that I had another middle name one day, Aloysius. I hated it, of course, but eventually came to terms with the idea. It was years later that she realized I had been writing an extra middle name on literally everything that required my full name, and asked me why I was doing such an odd thing. She had forgotten what she had done. When I told her, she laughed at me for about an hour straight, tears rolling down her face, laughing so hard she peed herself. Yeah, thanks. She taught me capsicum seeds were poisonous. They aren't. She really believes this one, though. Edit, yeah, I misspelled the name. You should have seen how I spelled it when I was 7. My grandfather thought it was hilarious to threaten me with renaming. He swore he would get my dad to change my name to Wolfgang Helmut IV if I misbehaved. I believed it wholeheartedly. Nobody in my family was ever named Wolfgang Helmut, and I am female. Could you imagine introducing yourself like that to people, though? You would have every right to put on the worst British accent you could and go, "Yes, hello, my name is Wolfgang Helmut IV. Charmed to meet you." My mother is convinced all clothes are too tight unless they are falling off of you. I looked like a ragamuffin for years until my rich sister-in-law pulled me aside and went, "Sweetie, I'm going to take you shopping before you ever have to attend any job interviews looking like that." What food tastes like. Chicken is not supposed to be tough, dry, and chewy. Steak is not usually chewy, flat, and gray. There are more seasonings available than salt and pepper. Once I taught myself to cook, the world just opened up with new flavors and foods. It was the best. I personally resonate with this one because I love cooking and I wanted to broaden my horizons beyond just Southern American food where I grew up and eating out of a paper bag every weekend as a treat. Once you open that door to a new culinary world, trust me, you'll want to try everything. To be a bystander, for lack of a better term, my parents are very against me standing up for others and even myself in some cases, and I had to learn that standing up for other people is the right thing to do. Also, how to pronounce cucumbers. For those of you wondering, they pronounced it cucumbers. Quantity over quality. Though my family was economically stable, privileged even, my parents grew up in poverty. So their way of buying was to buy cheap, which definitely should be taken into consideration, But ultimately, if the quality is not there, you end up spending more to continuously replace the item. We could afford to buy things of better quality that would last longer, but that's just not how they grew up. It still hurts me to spill $60 on a nice pair of shoes that will last more than a year, but I have since learned that I would much rather spend $60 this one time rather than getting 3 pairs of $20 crappy no-brand shoes that hurt my feet and fall apart every few months. That the garbage disposal will not trigger a nuclear reaction and blow up half the world within 5 seconds of being turned on without cold water running. That was a tough one to unlearn. I don't know, man. The way my dog reacts to it, I think it's gonna blow up. That you don't have to marry everyone you date. My mom was married 7 times and taught us that you never left anyone, no matter if they were horrible to you, took all your money, and treated your kids like crap, and that you could, quote, fix them if you married them. It took me a moving out and talking with other people to learn that is not normal and people break up all the time. Luckily, I never married any of those guys. They taught me to never disagree with anything. In my household, there was no such thing as no or why. Whoa, didn't expect this much of a response from the Reddit community. Thanks for the gold, strangers. I'm glad a lot of you are starting to be able to get over this bad programming and speak up if you disagree with something. Most parents want the best for you, and they do try their best, but they don't get everything right. Pretty much the same. My dad was abusive, and we all sort of just agreed with everything, because disagreeing or questioning anything led to yelling and throwing things and tantrums that lasted days. I grew up learning that the safest way to live was entirely unnoticed. So it took forever, even after I was an adult, for me to speak up, make my own choices, or do things I actually wanted to do. I still struggle with it a lot. That you should never do anything for others because nobody will do anything for you. I understand because my mom came from a very rough household growing up, but it was frustrating whenever she found out I bought lunch for my friends or gave someone a ride. It would always be the, nobody will look out for you, why do the same? That anger doesn't have to be the default reaction to anything you don't like. Someone has a different opinion, they're telling you you're wrong and stupid and you should be ticked. Someone makes an offhand comment that struck you the wrong way, they're jerks, you should be angry. Anything, anytime, anywhere happened that you didn't like for any reason, be angry. No thanks. It makes for a crappy life. Edit, wow you guys, I'm glad that this is something positive for everyone, and a lot of people have asked how to do this, for themselves or others. So instead of trying to reply to everyone, I'll give the short-ish answer here. First, realize that being angry at everything is going to make life pretty horrible. Then, it's just reminding yourself every time you have that gut reaction to ask yourself if it's worth it or not. 9 times out of 10, it's not. If it's situational, try and make the best of it as best you can, depending on the situation, obviously. If it's personal, try to see the other person's perspective. If they're just being a jerk, think of something you're going to enjoy doing later, smile, and wish them a great screw-off while you go about your day, because jerks aren't worth your emotional effort of being angry. I just want to add that minor inconveniences don't equal the end of the world. My mom does this thing where if eggs or whatever at the grocery store are really high due to inflation or high demand, she makes a big deal out of it and complains the whole time we're shopping. Like, I get it, stuff is expensive, but you're already buying 20 other things. You can wait on the eggs, Mom. My dad thought it was funny to teach my sister, brother, and I the wrong names to things. Sister confuses plates and bowls, brother confuses forks and spoons, I get confused with beetroot and capsicum. I get it right. Most of the time now. My mom is obsessively clean. It took me a couple years into my marriage to stop cleaning to her standards. I'm not a dirty person, but I don't have a fit about a little dust on the baseboards. She should see my carpet right now. I've been sewing. There are scraps and threads all over. She'd twitch. Cooking chicken. Until college, I thought that chicken was supposed to be dry. I hated it. My buddy cooked me chicken parmesan, and it was the best chicken I ever had. Turkey for me. I felt like a traitor to my family when I had Thanksgiving dinner with friends, and the turkey was better than I can ever remember my mom making, and she prides herself on her cooking. She was outdone by a guy a third of her age who was probably drunk for most of the cooking. I felt even more guilty taking my kids, both teenagers, there next time. We still do family Thanksgiving, but the three of us feel a little guilty about having more fun with 20 to 30 people crammed into a tiny apartment, most of them drinking and playing Cards Against Humanity and eating off of paper plates, than we do at a nice quiet table following all the traditions we followed forever. This is another one that hit home for me. When I was in college, I really started coming out of my shell as a human being and realizing that you can make friends and talk to them outside of class. It's because I'd always been pretty terminally online, so I wasn't really good at making friends. So having the chance to hang out with them, make and eat food with them, and play dumb party games with them, it was like I had found a new family. I like to reference the full quote, because people know this as blood is thicker than water, but it's actually blood of the covenant is thicker than water of the womb. Not to diss on anybody who's really close with their family, but sometimes having friends is your family. 10 out of 10 would recommend having friends. That just because someone is older than me doesn't mean that they know more than me. Yes, it's true that I don't have as much experience or knowledge about things in the world, but it is possible for me to know something that someone who is older than me doesn't know. My dad always used the "I'm older / wiser / more experienced" line if I said something, a fact or piece of information that he didn't agree with or think was true. It made me feel a little insecure about what I know and if what I know is right or not. My mom taught me that I had to respect my elders, even if they were possibly wrong because they were older and wiser. My dad, on the other hand, sat me down one day and said, "Son, people are stupid. Just because they are older doesn't mean they know crap from apple butter. I don't care how old they are. If they don't know their butt from a hole in the ground, it's okay to call them dumb. You're going to run into people who are smarter than you, but you're also going to run into people who will make you wonder just how in the world they manage to not drown themselves while taking a pee in the morning. You can know a lot or you can know a little. A smart man knows that he doesn't know everything. He also knows the value of common sense." That I'm not done eating until the plate is clear. I think my parents had a really good system for this. When each of us kids reached an appropriate age, we were to serve ourselves and had to clear our plates. We quickly learned how to portion meals appropriate to our individual sizes and appetites. All things political. My mother's side of the family is a constant cycle of choosing the opposite side of the political spectrum to spite one's parents, not for any actual political reasons. That I'm responsible for everyone else's feelings. My parents are narcissists, and if they were ever in a bad mood, it was because of something I did. I've spent my whole life managing their emotions, learning what sets them off, learning the subtle triggers, making sure you don't ever step out of line or say something that they might misinterpret or take too personally. And not just with them. I had to do that with everyone so that I will be a, quote, good kid and not make other people angry, because being a, quote, bad kid would reflect very poorly on them, and we can't have that. I now know that other people's emotions aren't my freaking problem, but I still feel responsible for my parents. It's tough. Korean fan death. For those who don't know about this, Korean people believe that if you sleep with the fan on with all windows and door closed, you will die. Still can't convince my parents that this is a myth. So I will be super dead? I've slept with the fan on since I got hamsters 8 years ago. They are long gone and I haven't gone back. I can't sleep in total silence now. Edit. My most upvoted comment by far. And to answer why, it was because those little jerks had a squeaky wheel that they only used at night, on top of general rustling. Anyway, one of them killed the other, so the survivor was cast out into the wilderness many years ago. No, nobody believes me when I say this. It's always hamsters that die the weirdest deaths. I swear to God, you can't go 5 minutes without someone telling a hamster story, and they end it with like, "Oh, I boiled my hamster alive because he crawled into the pot while I was making mac and cheese." It's never a natural death. You never hear about a hamster growing old and dying naturally. It's always really, really weird. I do not have to say sorry for everything. I used to say I'm sorry for everything. Reached for the same cookie? Sorry. We had different opinions and you're frustrated? Sorry. Didn't grab the right bag of groceries out of the truck? Sorry. I said sorry for everything. Even when cashiers didn't have nickels to give me back a change, I apologized for me causing them that inconvenience. Unlearning that is still a struggle at times. It's times like this I'm reminded of a wise man. Do not be sorry. Be better. Thank you, Kratos, God of War. that loud noises and roughhousing caused the cake to not rise when baking in the oven. Come to find out 20 years later, it was just a lie to get us to be quiet. Now that I think of it, they got quiet kids and cake. Scratch that, I'll remember this instead and use it in the future. That it's okay to want affection, and that it's not normal to be surrounded by fighting all the time. That I'm not a special snowflake. Being, quote, smart and talented stopped mattering around age 17, and it felt like a fraudulent cut-up until I learned how to work and apply myself. Shoutouts to all my gifted and talented kids with severe depression and anxiety, let's go! How to money. They never dealt with credit cards, student loans, etc. What they taught me was superficial, and some of their strategies put me deeper into debt. Took years, but dug out. My credit is great, and I'm actively saving every month. To always assume the worst might happen. My parents are conservative in every way, shape, and form. Like, no, Mom, just because I'm out having a good time with my friends and don't answer my phone doesn't mean that I'm dead. Now that I'm 100% independent, I'm learning that sometimes risk equals reward, whereas my parents had taught my siblings and I that risk usually leads to demise. I feel like I have to say sorry for all my commentary, but I really have a lot to say in this one. When I told my parents I wanted to go to a convention in another state with some online friends, my dad freaked and said that I would get trafficked. Like, there's a certain amount of risk that comes with flying in an airplane, being around people you never met in person, and being in a city, but you should expect your 24-year-old son to be a little more aware of what's happening than you think he is. By the way, had a fantastic time, and I'm going to another one with the same friends here in a few months. That men should be busy doing manly stuff, and that taking care of / entertaining the kids is women's work. Screw that. I hang out and do stuff with my kids every chance I get. What's the point of having them if you don't want to spend time with them? That you can always do better. Not that that's intrinsically bad, but when you don't learn to stop and appreciate what you've accomplished, you'll never be satisfied. Eat crappy. We never ate vegetables. Always starches and crap. So much processed BS. I'm 28 and finally have managed to restrain my palate to eat vegetables regularly. I do my best to eat plenty of veggies every day of all different types, and I'm very concerned with my health and fitness. Passing this on to my son is super important to me. All the time she called me a spoiled brat when I cried because we were eating ramen every night and I had no clothes to wear to school and problems with my lungs because the crappy house we were in had black mold, but we could somehow magically afford $60 to $80 of liquor for her boyfriend every week. That's some crap I am still unlearning. The bit I'm unlearning is that it's okay to voice your unhappiness. You are not spoiled for wanting decent living conditions. It's okay to accept gifts / help from other people. It does not make you a bad person and does not mean you are using them. Not accepting that my daughter is truly sorry for what she's done until she cries. When we were kids, if my sister or I broke the rules, we would get the wrath of dad come down on us. Anything besides ending up crying was disrespect or not taking the telling off seriously. My dad is from the Pacific Islands. Not that this in any way excuses him, but it's what he was taught. Children are disrespectful, parents are there to put a stop to it. I've caught myself early on, and I'm learning to turn myself around. Anger management, parenting courses. But I can hear my dad coming through sometimes, and it frightens me. I'm trying to stop the cycle. I can feel the irrational anger starting to come out if I'm telling our girl off and she just dismisses me. But I make it a point to be the adult in the situation and remember that it's her age and that she's learning. Side note, he's since changed a lot and is a fantastic and doting grandfather. I just don't want to carry on traits that I grew up with from his earlier years. When someone annoys you, cut them out of your life, permanently. Don't do this. Like, obviously, this is on a post where you're meant to unlearn what you've been told. In a real-life scenario, it's worth working out what annoys you most of the time. Because most people are going to know how to apologize and not do that annoying thing again. You just got to be simple and upfront without bashing them. But if you're online and somebody is bothering you, the block button is right there, especially if they're talking to you about some BS that you don't care about and they've just messaged you on Twitter for the first time. Okay, when I was a toddler, my dad used to play this game with this rhyme, where he'd recite 4-acre, eye blinker, nose stopper, chin bopper. Poked my forehead, the spot between my eyes, the tip of my nose, and then my chin. And then like a year or so later, my mom and I were in the car and I said something like, "Mom, my 4-acre hurts." And she looked at me and I was like, "Honey, that's your forehead." I looked back at her like she was insane and argued with her. No, it's my foreacre. And she had to answer me back, no, sweetie, it's your forehead, really. And I argued the point with her for half a minute before I realized that all this time I had been convinced that my forehead was actually called my foreacre. Let's end this on a long one. They instilled in me that all I had to do was go to college and get through it, and then I'd get, quote, my job that would pay $60,000 with benefits, and then I worked there until I retired, didn't matter what I studied or if I networked or pursued extracurriculars. Just finish school and you get your job. When that didn't work, put in more applications. I graduated in 2008 when there was no economy, with a useless degree and no extracurriculars or internships, and a GPA that was too crappy to even consider grad school. I've spent the last 8 years figuring out that this is now a hustler's economy, and you don't make money by applying to places and sending out your resume unless you're looking for a $9 an hour job at a sandwich shop. You have to develop actual skills, be good at BSing, talk to people, keep your eyes and options open, be willing to expand your skill set, keep an eye on what skills are marketable, not be afraid to jump into something just because you've never done it before, realize that employer loyalty is a two-way street that is permanently closed and has been for years, etc. Every good job I've ever had has come from a lead that a friend has given me. None of them have come from shotgunning my resume to every pyramid scheme in the Craigslist classifieds. Basically, I had to learn this entire skill set and mindset that was completely alien to me, and unlearn the notion that you just step off the graduation stage with your bachelor's in English and start courting job offers from all the places that are eager to hire a guy whose main selling point is that he's literate, like extra literate.
People who've had a creepy feeling about someone come true. What happened? Not me, but my cousin. She was on an overnight Greyhound bus, and a man got on, and many of the seats were full. He walked towards the open seat next to her and looked as if he was going to sit there, and my cousin says, "You can't sit here." Usually a very open and friendly person, she kind of thought to herself, "Wow, I really came off as a B-word there." But she had a bad feeling about him. So the man finds another seat and my cousin falls asleep. A little while later, she wakes up to the bus pulled over to the side of the road and the police cars outside. The police came onto the bus and arrested the man who wanted to sit with my cousin. He had found another woman to sit with and had attempted the unspeakable act on her. How strange. I'm pretty sure that get the frick away from that person is a basic survival instinct. It's whether or not you're listening to it or not. Thank God your cousin did and is okay. My ex-boyfriend's dad had always given me the creeps. Nothing in particular, just a really bad vibe. Broke up with that ex about 8 years ago. I saw in the paper recently his dad got arrested for the unspeakable act. The girl told her mum when she was 13. She had been one of his victims since she was 5. Fricking horrifying. Back when I was in high school, some new kid joined. Only really interacted with him on the football field, but he really rubbed me the wrong way. I'm not a small guy, I'm big enough to fend for myself, so while he creeped me out, I wasn't really scared of him. I should have been, but ego gets in the way when you're a teenager. All of a sudden, he tries to injure me in discreet ways while playing football, like stamping on my ankle, tripping me up while none of us had the ball, nobody was looking, etc. After a couple more incidents, he stepped it up, a lot. He ended up stabbing me in the face while I was reading a book. We don't know if he meant to murder me or seriously maim me, but he punched me 3 times with a sharpened key in his fists. 2 of the blows got deflected by my glasses, which left a giant mark on the lenses and where my temple was. Sometimes you feel off about someone, but they don't look like they can really threaten you too much, but in reality, they can and they will. In college, I worked at a bar and they brought in this new bouncer. From the second I met him, I immediately felt like there was something seriously wrong with him. His smile and eye contact were too intense. I told a coworker that the guy gave me the creeps and she told me she thought he was cute and nice, and didn't get where I was coming from. A quick Google search pulled up his mugshot and articles about how he was watching his college roommate's dog one weekend and horribly attacked and maimed it. He burnt this poor dog and poured bleach on her. She thankfully survived and he was arrested. The article talked about how he was laughing at the police arresting him, saying he knows he won't get in any trouble. He was fired and told to never come back once management found out. Oof. Probably doubly saved in that he got fired before he abused his power. Bouncers have a lot of sway around the intoxicated clientele they serve, and it could have got really ugly. Not me, but my mum. My sister was going to visit her friend out of state, so her friend's friend offered to drive her there. He drove a few hours to get to our house and was noticeably tired when we arrived, so my sister suggested he just sleep on the couch and they'll go in the morning. The entire night, my mum's going in and out of our rooms saying that there's something off about the guy, that she really doesn't like him but can't figure out why. She actually quietly went out the side door and wrote down his license plate at one point. The next morning, my sister's in his car for maybe 30 minutes before she feels sick and asks him to just take her home, which he does, much to my mother's delight. About 6 months later, my mum's looking at her news feed when she sees a familiar face and calls my sister and I over and yells, "I told you something was off about him." Turns out that about a year earlier he had murdered his ex-girlfriend and that his friend, who helped him bury her body, finally decided to tell the cops not because he developed a conscience, but because he was mad at him for stealing his toaster. In conclusion, my mum thought Houseguest was creepy. Houseguest turns out to be a murderous toaster thief. Well, to be fair, I wouldn't want to implicate myself as an accessory after the fact, but steal my kitchen appliances and it's game on. Pro-life tip: never steal a toaster from the guy who helped you bury your murder victim's body. There was a guy interested in dating my mum years ago. She wasn't interested, something seemed off. He was also interested in dating 2 of her other friends. All 3 had young daughters. Shortly after this, we moved away, and he started dating one of the friends. They stayed with us at a weekend music festival, and the girl wanted to stay in the trailer that our family had rented, so we let her. I'll always be grateful we did, because it kept her away from that creep. We found out he was abusing her shortly before we'd heard that he'd died in a car accident. Good riddance. Guys like that are the main reason I have no interest in dating right now. My daughter is 11 and I'm okay with being single for a few more years. I prefer that to unknowingly bringing a monster into the house. Honestly, having 2 stepdads who were awful to me, I thank you. I'm not a single mother, but I wish mine would have been okay with just the 2 of us for a while, because I always felt like she needed a man around and chose 2 scumbags, one who she knew since she was 16. My brother is 9, and I tell her that if she wants to get married again, I can take my brother to live with me, and I will be single. Met this guy on a night out. He was new to the area and friends with my friend's brother. He came across as nice and friendly, but then he started being a bit strange, like he kept rubbing my back and touching my legs. We all went back to my friend's house and I was pretty drunk, but this guy kept trying to get me to leave with him without seeing anyone. I told everyone something was weird about him. Turns out he'd been charged with doing the unspeakable act against a 10-year-old, and that's why he'd left his previous city. He'd crept on a 13-year-old a few weeks before he met me, and the police found out he was in possession of a lot of adult material containing children. My mum and I were in a cafe and she had her handbag down by her feet. This couple comes in and sits at the table behind us, and he attracted my attention because he kept poking his girlfriend, telling her how to sit, and just, the hairs on my neck went up. I hate that controlling bullcrap. So he's in my periphery, and this guy won't sit still when my mum says, "Hey, where's my bag?" She finds it a second later, moved and open. She reached in to get her purse and said, "My card is gone." So the couple behind had stood and were walking at speed toward the door. I didn't even hesitate. "Stop that man!" Because I figured I could apologize later if I was wrong. One of the waitresses was right by the door and she followed him out the door, at which point the guy dropped my mum's card, mumbled something about having found it, and then ran for it. I guess if he hadn't been such a butt to his girlfriend, I probably wouldn't have noticed. He was a friend of mine, nicest guy you could ever meet. He would go out of his way to do things for people. Something about him always gave me the slightest weird feeling though. We messaged at least once a day, and then all of a sudden I didn't hear from him for 2 weeks. Turns out he was busted in a Craigslist sting for soliciting a minor for more adult acts. Hey, I don't know if anyone will see this, but around middle school I started getting creeped out by my father. He wouldn't even do anything you could point to and say, "That, right there, that's it." But you just got the feeling he was like a spider, watching and waiting, something lurking and dangerous. He began running a group called Scam the Scammers, where they'd make scammers do ridiculous things. It was all in good fun, because they deserved it. Humiliating, sometimes painful things. Teachers wouldn't call home to discuss anything we did, positive or negative. There were notes in my file to only discuss things with my mother, no matter what. He started becoming obsessed with conspiracy theories. Obama was a Kenyan Muslim, my mother was cheating on him with a woman and 3 men, all sorts of things. You got the feeling something was wearing my father as a skin suit. That's the best way I can describe it. Turns out he has an inoperable brain tumor. He's permanently changed. My father is alive, but he's no longer my dad. Oof. I mean, I'm all for some lightweight scammer scamming if it doesn't hurt people, but yeah, this case it was just the act of a deeply unwell man. This is tragic. Went to school with this guy since about 4th grade. He was a bully and made sure I knew that I wasn't liked, as he used an old doll and named it after me and beat it up with his friends. He always had a weird, creepy vibe, which got worse in high school. He and his friends were actually a lot nicer to me in high school, but I stayed away as much as I could as he made me uncomfortable. About a year after we graduated, he was arrested for following an underage girl and for grabbing her near her school when she was on lunch break. His friends have since cut off contact. Not sure what's happened to him, but he always creeped me out. When I was trying to get my mental health back on track, I went to see this psychiatrist who just gave me a super creepy vibe the minute I saw him, but was such a good psychiatrist I decided to ignore it. My gut feeling was correct when about 4 to 5 months into seeing him, he was arrested for having 10,000 plus unsolicited photos of patients' feet or them sitting on his couch that I've sat on. It sucks opening up to someone so much and having something like this happen, especially in his line of work. I had a doctor do the same. Different specialty, different kinds of pics. I'm currently awaiting trial. I know how you feel. It's so much more heinous to use a position of trust to gain access to people just to take advantage of them. Got a bad vibe from the dad across the street when I was a kid. Military guy who always seemed to be on a power trip. His oldest son and I went to the same school and would occasionally carpool. One day it was his dad's turn to drive us. His son stayed home sick, but he offered to drive me all the same. Thankfully, it wasn't a long ride, but the entire time he talked about his beat-up Camaro. Definitely creeped me out. Fast forward a couple of years, his wife threw him out one morning. Turns out he'd been beating the crap out of her for a while. One morning while hitting her again, he stepped on their 1-year-old baby who was crawling on the floor and broke the kid's arm. Never saw him again after that. It's like my worst nightmare to step on a baby or even a cat or dog. Or close a door by accident on a cat sneaking through behind you like they do. I was just thinking yesterday that stuff like this must happen fairly often even from good people that just make one wrong step. You could easily kill a kid, cat, or dog by slipping and falling wrong on them. The world is too dangerous. Time to go back to bed. I worked in fast food restaurants from 14 to 16. The lovely old couple sold it to a younger couple, and I got the creeps around the husband from day one. Tried to ignore it, just got on with work, but the first time we were working just the two of us, he followed me into a walk-in freezer and grabbed me. I learned to pay attention to my radar after that. There was this guy that one of my friends at church was dating at the time. I really just felt something dark when I was around him. They eventually married but divorced later on. It turns out that feeling was because this guy is a legit serial killer. Initially, he confessed to I think 3 murders. The police now believe he's responsible for at least 10 within 200 miles of our small town. There was a kid who always weirded me out in school. Nothing major, but he looked at girls too long, and never when they looked at him. When I was in 8th grade, he told my girlfriend that he wondered what she tasted like and wanted to touch her skin. I threatened him if he didn't leave her be. I saw his name on an indecent offender registry last year, when I was helping my mum search for property details. Guy in high school always gave me the creeps, but I could never figure out why. 6 months later, they find a rifle in his locker at school and that he'd called in bomb threats. This was before any of the school shootings happened in the US, so at the time I didn't really think that much of it. Now it totally freaks me out. I just looked him up and there's an entire Reddit thread about him. He's now a white supremacist and a possible murderer. A dude couch surfing at my son's apartment had a very twitchy vibe like an addict hurting for a fix. I asked my son, "Oh no, he hates substances. He just has like arthritis or something." He borrowed my son's car, got his fix, crashed the car. Said he got carjacked. We reported the car stolen. 2 days later, he OD'd in my son's apartment. My son found him and the EMS guys saved him. My son realized he had issues and started looking for Medicaid rehab space. Dude OD'd again on the couch. EMS saved him again. Narcan is magic. We went to the hospital, told him he could not come back and to text my son where he wanted his stuff dropped off. We dropped it off at his grandma's house. Well, this fellow was clearly in need of serious help. Wish there was more to say about stories like this, but it's just sad, isn't it? Addiction is an illness. When I was 19, I worked at a local restaurant. I loved working there, but I ended up quitting because of some D-bag that was hired. He was in his mid-30s and gave every girl in the restaurant the absolute creepiest vibes. He was constantly saying inappropriate stuff about his past and was just a butthole to people in general. I hated working with him because he creeped me out and was also just mean. I started trading shifts to get away from him. One day a night shift manager was fired and our boss put creepy guy in a temporary manager position. I immediately went to our boss and told him I was uncomfortable with the idea and explained how creepy he was. My boss leveled with me and said the D-bag had no actual manager power and was just temporary until he found someone else. He was just there to run shifts. My boss arranged it so my schedule never crossed over with the creep. One day a coworker of mine got sick and I was asked to cover her shift. I get there and Creep is managing. I thought I could deal with one night, but a friend of mine called the store sobbing. She had tried to call my cell around 100 times, but it was in my purse. She was crying hysterically and told me she'd been a victim of the unspeakable act and didn't know what to do or where to go, but that she was horrified and too scared to leave. I told my friend I'd be right there and told D-Bag that I had an emergency and would be leaving. It was a slow night and I wasn't needed anyway, but he freaked out and tried to physically stop me, demanding to know my emergency. I tried to sidestep it, but eventually told him what had happened to my friend. He burst out laughing in my face and told me that was hilarious and not an excuse to leave. I told him to go to hell and shoved past him. He told me I couldn't leave and I said, "Watch me." I went outside and burst into tears and called my boss and told him I quit after explaining what had happened. A few months later, I was working at my new job and a former co-worker came in and said they had some news for me. Apparently 2 police officers showed up at my old workplace and served papers to D-Bag. He had been stalking a girl for the last 5 years, and it had started when she was 14 or 15. He had finally committed the unspeakable act against her. In conclusion, Creep gets hired at work, laughs about the unspeakable act, I hate him, and I quit. He gets charged with the stalking and unspeakable act against a teenage girl. I always had a weird feeling about my stepdad. He always made me uncomfortable and I always felt like he was watching me. He would make comments about my body and my wardrobe, causing me to feel insecure and watch what I wore around him. When I told my mum, she would say things like, "He's old-fashioned," or "He's just looking out for you." My mum had gone out to the country to visit family, leaving my stepdad, myself, and my older brother to take care of the house. One night, my brother went to a party and I stayed home because I worked early the next morning, but left my bedroom door open so I could hear my brother come home and make sure he made it safe. Instead, my stepdad decided to crawl under my bed and try to commit the unspeakable act against me. It was one of the scariest moments of my life. I pushed him off and ran to the bathroom. I was so freaked out, I just grabbed my work clothes and went to the car and drove off to a random neighborhood and slept in my car. My mum found out a year later because I told my older brother, but she's never talked to me about it. And she's still with him, too. When I told my brother, we gathered all the money we'd been saving up and moved out a month later. I'm blessed to have a brother who loves me and took me out of a bad place. He's been one of my support systems through all this. As for me, I'm in therapy to deal with my trauma and I feel like I'm getting better. A year ago, I wouldn't have been able to type all of this out. I worked for a call center a few years ago and there was a guy that sat at the desk across from me. He was about 40 to 50 and was not married. I'm young enough to be his daughter. He would do anything to talk to me. Come by my desk, run into me in the break room, get in the elevator with me. It was excessive but never threatening at first. He started to say inappropriate things about my outfits. I never wore anything overly provocative, but I figured he was just an awkward dude that did not know how to flirt. I just brushed him off time and time again, but something was definitely off about him. At one point, the secretary came up to me and asked if he was bothering me, and I told her what had been happening. Turns out he did this with only blonde women at the office. He was notorious for creeping them out. It started small, but then he would slowly transition into propositioning them for adult fun times and offering to pay for it. Knowing this, I avoided him altogether. I would pretend he was not there even if he was talking to me directly. I would catch him staring at me, but he backed down a lot after he realized that I wouldn't give in. One day, I came into work and he was gone. Desk was cleared off, totally empty. He apparently had sent another blonde woman a bunch of flowers and followed her out into the parking lot where she got off work. He had parked his car right next to hers and tried to force her into his car to go home with him, but she got away. He was fired and escorted off the property the next day by the police. I'm not sure why he had decided to come back or why he wasn't arrested sooner, but he was caught at work and removed. Nothing too eventful, but it is scary knowing that it could have been me that he forced into his car. A neighborhood kid I grew up with liked to play with matches and was fascinated with fires of any kind. It made me nervous because a sort of wild look came over his eyes when he'd stare into the fire he had created. I even told my parents, who mentioned it to his parents, who thought it was just a phase he was going through. Then a few years later, it was reported that he burned his parents' garage down and was being charged with arson and clinically treated for pyromania. When I used to work at a deli, we hired a 20-something kid that looked like the serial killer Ed Kemper, sans the mustache. At first, he would amuse us by telling us stories about how he'd fought off 8 guys with weapons, or how his girlfriend was a model who traveled all the time, and that's why we never saw her. Then things started getting bad, especially when someone angered him. I would catch him talking to himself, saying things like, "If I see that B word again, I'm going to stick this in both her eyes." Management got wind of this and canned his butt immediately. 10 months later, we find out he actually went to prison for attempting to assault someone with a knife. In college, my best friend met a lady in one of her AG classes. The lady was super weird. I remember her having this huge vendetta against the university because they wouldn't let her use handicap parking spaces when she had no proof she needed them. This lady is the reason I Google the crap out of new people now, because I looked her up and found an article that she was a serial animal hoarder and mistreater. That was from the year before we met her, and she would be the feature of similar articles in the future. This was at the start of our second semester there. If you search her name, plus cat lady, there are a bunch of new stories starting in 2003. It looks like the last updates were in 2016. In conclusion, best friend makes new friend who turns out to be an animal hoarder with dead cats in her freezer. Not me, but my wife. She's a teacher and had an elementary student who creeped her out from day one. He was manipulative, always trying to get his work done by copying other students' papers, and generally just a little odd. Partway through the school year, his mum had a manic-depressive episode and sadly took her own life. 2 years later, the student blew part of his hand off, making a pipe bomb. A year after that, he was also left unsupervised with a kindergarten-aged student who ironically, my wife would also later have as a student, and horribly mistreated her. He's in juvie now, though he should be out before he's 17. I was so young that I don't remember, but my dad has told me this story. My uncle had a roommate when I was about 3 years old. He was apparently a pretty nice dude on the surface, friendly, and didn't at all appear creepy to my dad or uncle that he lived with. Once, my dad and uncle expressed wanting to go somewhere that wasn't appropriate for me, and the guy offered to babysit. I was a very sweet and quiet kid, but upon my dad saying he'd be back in a little bit and I was going to stay with this man for a few hours, I apparently threw an absolute crap storm, kicking, screaming, and refusing. And even at 3, this was absolutely not normal behavior. My dad was really confused, but changed his mind and did not leave me with him. And only weeks later, my uncle discovered the man in question had a history of prison time for possessing indecent material containing minors and attempted kidnapping. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description too. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.